Uh, uh, uh. Yo, what up? It's Donut, and you tuning in to all your Illuminati news. And we are here with Matt EHRET, author, researcher, owner of so many different companies. Rising Tide Foundation. I don't know. Maybe that's not a company. I don't know. I don't know how to say
Yeah,
it.
it's a legal entity. It's a nonprofit. Yeah.
Filmmaker. I'm just in love with your work and also your wife's work. I've got your books, which are just so jam packed, full of so much great information that it's not like you can just read it and move on. It's something like you read a chapter or two, and then that's your whole year, like of study, at least for me. Diving into your work in your Substacks,
Huh.
and I could just go on for days about how much you've inspired me on so many different levels. How are you doing today?
Oh, cool, man. No, thank you, Donut. I appreciate that immensely. I'm doing good, and yeah, I'm glad that the research is resonating so nicely, and congratulations on your new Illuminati comic book as well. I've been following the progress of that, so well done.
I did my best to put in something that you talked about, how it is a mythology in a sense. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about that. I'm not sure if you even remember saying that, but in one of your podcasts, you're like, they're trying to build like like he gets struck by lightning and then the
Uh,
documents are there. Like, come on.
Oh, I hear you. Right. Yeah, the whole story of like how the revelations of the insidious nature of the Illuminati, which I'm sure it's insidious. I'm sure that they're secret societies plotting, conspiring to rule over and enslave humankind that is duped into loving their shackles is a project though that stretches back deep into our history as your audience knows. And for this to work, it requires a lot of creative narratives to be sort of games within games even. And one of those games within games that I've kind of, my nose has kind of smelt something a little off on is the story that of how the revelation of this Illuminati aspect of it that was launched by Adam Weishaupt in 1776 in Bavaria was made public. And again, things don't tend to just unfold that way. It almost has a supernatural quality to the creative writing around this letter carrier, this courier, who, yeah, gets struck by lightning. And then some good peasant picks up the letters that I guess weren't burnt by the smoke and ash or the fire and starts reading them. And it's like, oh, these are the correspondences between Cato, aka whatever, Weishaupt, I forget the names that they gave each other, documenting their global conspiracy to enslave everything. And you read some of the letters that have been made public, and it reads, I find that reading those letters that people have transcribed, I don't even know if they're the real letters, but that have been transcribed and go public, it strikes me that there's a cartoonishness to the language, that if you are actually a high level sophisticated oligarchical grand strategist, if you are able to operate on that higher level culturally, you would not write like a Pinky in the Brain personality type or like a Protocols of Zion. You know, like when you read the writings from the Protocols of Zion, this Okrana theosophical hoax that was designed in order to create mass anti-Jewish hysteria within Russia, within Europe, that gave rise to and justified the growth of fascism in the 20th century. If you read those documents that have been proven to be forgeries, they speak like they're Pinky in the Brain. It's cartoonishly over the top, and real oligarchs who are very much capable of doing very, very bad things on a top down level, they don't write that way. They're not so blatantly over the top. So again, yeah, I sense that there was probably like an attempt to co-opt, to try to contain the revelation of secret societies conspiring, and to try to make them more, or create versions of the story that would incapacitate people, truth seekers, from actually having a proper understanding of what the thing is, such that they could then act upon and defend themselves from that thing by creating these little, whether it's aliens have been out, like everything bad can be attributed to aliens wanting to control us, or everything bad can be attributed to the Jews, or everything bad can be attributed to the Muslims out to destroy our freedoms, or everything bad, whatever. There's so many ways of controlling and twisting these narrative
China
models.
psyop is a good one.
The
as
China
well.
side, the Chinese are at the heart of all of our problems. Damn commies! They just want to destroy our capitalist freedoms. Like, it's so simplistic, but people buy into that stuff.
It sparks something in the imagination, and the Illuminati, and you breaking that down really opened up the floodgates to understanding the way these Eleusinian mystery started to work with this imagination. It's sparked the imagination of the music industry to the Da Vinci codes. It's a household name, the Illuminati, but people don't understand that it's an actual secret society that's fairly new. And you've just wrote 3 books. Congratulations on it. They're all available. Revenge of the Mystery Cults, because this isn't just something that happened a couple 100 years ago. This has been going on since Mystery Babylon. Is that what's going on?
Well, the question of Mystery Babylon and the Age of Aquarius, that's volume 1, yeah. And I decided to just release these all at the same time, so that I found myself kind of on 3 different tracks of investigation that I could sense were leading to the same conclusion, the same sort of story, which I sort of allude to in the subtitle of volume 1, which is the rise of the Age of Aquarius, the sort of synthetic creation of a new global pagan religion to replace all of the traditional religious movements of the last 2,000 years in every part of the world, and to revive the worst elements of that sort of pagan system of mystery cults that had managed the entire ancient world top down, from Persia, Babylon, Asia Minor, India. Even there's evidence of this thing stretching from India to Egypt, in the centuries and even millennia before the emergence of Christianity. I would even say before even Judaism was formulated. So all 3 stories, they sort of have a different topic or a different way of approaching the subject matter of the mystery cults. The first one being more the political dynamic. So what are the dominant think tanks that have been misshaping so much of the 20th century and into the present? And Mystery Babylon, I guess that's what we'll do, right? I'll do a little summary of the 3 and the purpose. So I'll just rant a little bit here. But so what I did, and this is a lot to do with Cynthia Chung, my wife, her work on with me on the UFO film series that we've been doing, The Hidden Hand Behind UFOs. She wrote episode 1 from an angle I didn't expect about a year and a half ago. And originally I was approaching the UFO topic from the standpoint of a purely geopolitical social engineering operation, which involved people like Alan Dulles, a lot of CIA operatives going back to the late 40s. And my script wasn't working well. It wasn't flowing the way I wanted it to. And so she took a shot at it and came up with a completely different way of thinking about the whole topic that I was not on. And it kind of expanded my mind quite a bit, because she said, no, this is clearly tied to the ancient Gnostic mystery cults that have, and so she was thinking about it from a much higher level than I was. And she came up with that script that went through the sacred myths of the Greeks, of the Romans, of the Babylonians, the Persians, the creation myths, and how they were respun into the Gnostic stories of those fake Christian sects that tried to infiltrate Christianity and destroy it from within under Valentinius and Basilides in the 2nd, 3rd century. There's a big war where they were actually doing cannibalism, like they were actually doing human, it wasn't like eating the wafer was a metaphor for the body of Christ. Yeah, that's the picture of The Hidden Hand Behind UFOs, episode 3. Episode 1 is the one I'm referring to. And so she then in a very brushstroke manner, but very concretely, traced this program to the emergence of the spiritualist movement of the 1830s, 40s, of channelers, necromancers that would channel the messages of the dead. that always had a priesthood overseeing these games of perception. And then from there, she sort of ended it on the rise of Swedenborgian followers who also had their own weird cosmology of aliens and demons that were interfacing with us, that was tweaked several times over, including what was done with Mormonism and Joseph Smith and his idea of interplanetary beings, angels, demons, the dead, that would each get their own planets, that would interface with earthlings that were initiated. So that sort of caused me to just reevaluate all of the geopolitical research I had been taking for granted over the last several years. And I revisited, since I had written a lot on the Fabian Society. I wrote a couple of books on that, on the Roundtable movement of Milner and Cecil Rhodes. So I had done quite a bit of work on their operations, their origins, what they did, initiating wars in the 20th century. But then I was like, well, wait a minute, what's really going on here? What template, what formula is being followed with these things? And so volume 1 came out of that, because I started rethinking about the Fabian Society's relationship with the Roundtable movement as being sort of a left-hand, right-hand path, or maybe I should say it more like a male feminine template of co-organizing these institutions with different principles that are operational, but that have controlled oppositions. So they seem to be different. The Fabians, for those who don't know, the Fabian socialists appeal more to those who are of a more socialist orientation. They're much more based upon, at least in words, the protection of the poor against capitalist exploitative interests. They're more interested in organizing labor. Seems a little bit more empathic. But then when you look at the founders of it and those who ran it and run it to this very day, top down, they're all misanthropic anti-humanists who are usually part of the leading oligarchical families that despise the poor, that despise organized labor. But
It's
so what's
philanthropy is with Billy Bob Gates and different charities always have this nefarious behind it. Yeah, occult programming behind the charities and the hospitality. Yeah,
exactly. And I think a lot of this. So yeah, you have this hypocrisy, this cover, and then on the other hand, you have the Roundtable movement that organized that was at the heart of the Rhodes Trust, the creation of the Council on Foreign Relations, this international web of think tanks under the Royal Institute for International Affairs, as it became known in 1919, but it existed as the Roundtable associations before that, led by all of those orchestrators who were typically the old school, hard British imperialist types that were taking pride in the Boer War, killing the blacks, reigning in the savages, the red people, very read the writings of Alfred Milner and people will get a sense of what this is. But they would often overlap, these two agencies. And with the Roundtable movement, you had the Rhodes Scholarships, which brainwashed young elites into Oxford. Yeah, there's Milner right there.
And this guy popped up. I was looking at something, but maybe it wasn't him. Everyone has an aesthetic at certain times of history, so maybe he looks like someone else. I think I'm thinking Lloyd George. Lloyd George and him look the same. There's this aesthetic. Because I was looking into the House of Lords. And trying to understand that with the symbolism of the unicorn being Scotland, and they're just looking at the heraldry symbolically tells a fascinating story. And yeah, everyone looks the same to me. It's
white 19th century white people. No, it's true though.
Yeah. That's what the people are going to say. They're going to look back at this video. They're going to be like, everybody looks the same.
Yeah, right. Why do these two guys, Matt and Donut, look so similar? Just one's wearing a hat. It's the same guy. No, so there is an aesthetic. There's a weird British imperial aesthetic where they're emulating each other. There's an element of that which is true. And Lloyd George is part of the Round Table movement. So he's installed as prime minister by an operation overseen by Lord Milner, who becomes the minister of the colonies, that then brings in and controls World War I. That's Lloyd George. That's like an older version of yeah, I guess if you look at him as a younger guy, he's a Milner-esque quality about his mustache. But so he's the guy who becomes, later on when Nazism is created, he's no longer the prime minister, but he's still a major power player, as is Milner. Well, Milner dies in 1924. But this whole roundtable movement around Lloyd George, they're very pro-Nazi. Some of them are, at least, because the other half goes and becomes, at a certain point around this guy Leo Amory, who is also part of Milner's kindergarten, he becomes part of the Churchill, faction that says, well, let's put down the Hitler machine for now. It's not really cooperating the way we wanted it to. And then you had Lloyd George writing messages to Hitler saying, no, I'll be your Nazi prime minister, And then, and that's when he was older, but he was still like really vicious. And in that sense, he was closely aligned with Oswald Mosley, from the British Union of Fascists, the other guy who aspired to be the British, the Nazi prime minister. Oswald Mosley's a key guy. He comes up in that Netflix show, Peaky Blinders.
You see how everyone has this mustache and how it has a resurgence. Like, I don't think I was being weird to say like everyone like looks the same, but everybody now today that's critical on the Jewish question, like that's their big thing. They always got like a mustache on it. They're probably emulating.
Maybe at some level.
I don't know. It's just something I look at because
as the mustaches are getting smaller and smaller below the nose, right? Just incremental gradualism. We're still not ready for that yet as a fashion style, but wait 10 years.
Maybe it does something though. Like, how the vril, the ladies, they grow their hair long. I don't know. I do know that there's fashion though, like Hugo Boss was making the outfits for the Third Reich, I believe. Fashion, looking at the fashion awards like Balenciaga or Alexander McQueen, I think there's an element to the mind control through the fashion. Like, it sounds silly, but the movie Zoolander is about the fashion industry and how he's this MK Ultra puppet. Like, looking at it in a sense, I think there's something up with it, like the kids sagging their pants, just like little things like that. I think goes into something. There's something there. I don't know what it is, but
no, I think you're definitely right. Like there's something. The material and spiritual worlds have a weird relationship sometimes, and it doesn't mean just because you dress like a slob doesn't mean you have a slobby soul and mind, but it doesn't help the mind if you live in a pigsty. It doesn't help the mind to stay organized. You get, you do have to have, it helps to have a certain discipline in your dress, your contour, your comportment, how you live your life physically, that will then have a reciprocal feedback loop in that sense with the discipline you put into your inner self. Are you sloppy a thinker or not? And definitely, I think, when you look at the dress codes that are promoted, there's probably certain spiritual considerations by the social engineers when they're like encouraging a slave caste that they want to keep culturally enslaved so that they don't have to do too much work input wise to keep that society down. They'll find and promulgate, like I'm thinking more in our recent time, pants that might, be propagandized, or wearing your pants down below your ass so you can't really run, you can't move very well. But that aesthetic is something they'll promote,
or the
that
blue
comes out
hair.
of the prison culture, which is it's people emulating the prison criminal lifestyle, because when you're in prison, you're not allowed to wear a belt because it could be a weapon, you could hang yourself. So that's why people in prisons frequently had low hanging pants, and so then they would promote rappers and singers that would also make that cool, and before you know it. And then you got the blue hair. I don't know what the blue hair meaning would be. I have no idea.
But because like all the anti-Trump people, they dye their hair blue. So it's protest. It's and then you got the hippie movement that they didn't shower, and there was a reason for that, so people didn't take them seriously like they would um, the anti-war guy that's slipping my mind right now, who was very serious, dressed nice, was respectable. The hippies weren't respectable because they were rolling around in the mud.
Right. Well, they definitely have this like the Nazis, when you look at their origins, it was very hippie-esque. So you had in the 1911, 1912 period, a lot of the top level killer SS officials who rose to prominence in the Thule Society, who became the top level killer SS officers, were part of what was known as the Wundervogel movement, the wandering birds, which were basically, you know, proto hippies doing sacred orgies in the Black Forest, going back to nature, eating vegan food. And I'm not against vegan food. I'm just saying that was part of the lifestyle thing, is going back to nature, not really using, you know, soap, because that is a product of the industrial civilization, which is an affront to Mother Gaia, the purity of the Earth Mother Goddess that they really idealize. And it's always like this. This goes back to, there's always been these back to nature cults that dichotomize human civilization from nature as being two separate, incompatible things. Right? That's the Thule Society logo, which, as we see, is just a rebranded version of the swastika.
And these are the mystery cults, it seems like, right? The Thule Society.
Yeah.
And it's alien as well.
Yeah.
With alien energies.
Well, there's variations of it after World War II, where they started adding to the story a little bit during the Cold War. So a lot of the leading Nazis, like Julius Evola, Carl Jung's friend, what's his name, Miguel Serrano. These were all like hard Nazi types. Mircea Eliade was another one. Joseph Campbell was also an assistant to Carl Jung, who was also the top official for about 7 years, between 33 and 39 of the Nazi. I forgot the name of the official organization of German psychology. That was Carl Jung, was the president of it, and oversaw and created a way of thinking about the human psyche that was very useful for Himmler, for the Annenalba leadership, in organizing their own revamping of the Bible. You know, that's what they followed, the Jungian template and theories about the archetypes, the collective unconscious, the collective soul, in their formulation of what the Volksspirit was. But Jung himself was a follower of a lot of these, you know, Wagnerian Volksspirit mystics who were always against Christianity. They were always against Judaism, seeing them both as two things, two aspects of something that really disrupted the reign and control of the ancient mystery cults. And they have a certain romantic idea, especially Wagner, Schopenhauer did earlier, Nietzsche. They all have the same, all of these creatures who influenced the Nazis, as well as the Theosophists, who also influenced very heavily the spiritual outlook of the Nazis, including Carl Jung directly.
Right, and that's what I always been connecting is like this. I'm still learning, but whenever I see people say that they're like pro the Nazis, and I try to point like, no, they're not like Christian. They're very theosophical. This is like a theosophy. This is like a United Nations theosophy religion. Like it's totally not what like
no like, yeah, they anybody who has this romantic idea of Hitler as a Christian, no, he oversaw the rewriting of the Bible. They had their own Reichsbible, so if you wanted to be a Christian, you had to get rid of whatever Bible you were using and adopt only the Reichsbible, which seriously rewrote everything. They basically made Jesus's mom get impregnated by a Roman pureblood, a warrior, which is where they said, okay, so there's no connection between the dirty Jewish blood and Jesus, because it was actually this Roman warrior that had sex with his mother. And they got rid of some of the commandments. They got rid of a few, like the thou shalt not kill. They got rid of that because it was incompatible with the practical needs of what they would demand of their society in order to achieve their weird utopian world that was desired. and they replaced certain other they added certain commandments, like thou shalt honor your Führer was a commandment they just infused into the Reich's Bible. Like, there's a couple of other ones too that I'm forgetting, but it's in my book. It's actually all of the stuff we're talking about now is all in volume 1 of Revenge of the Mystery Cults and the Rise of the Age of Aquarius.
Nice.
Yeah.
It would be great to get like a hand on one of those old Nazi Bibles. Like, it would be cool. Just like, they're probably worth so much money.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure there were a lot of them. I'm pretty sure people could acquire them without too much ado. And maybe there's been scanned copies that are available online. I haven't looked for that, but I will now. It's something I would like to have in my library as far as a reference piece.
And everybody, click the link below. Go get your copy right now. Get all 3 copies of Revenge of the Mystery Cults and all of Matt EHRET's work. You got to get these books because they're going to be worth lots of money, especially if they do a digital book burning and whatnot. Congratulations as well. 3 books. Oh my goodness. And are they, I mean, in like your work and your wife's work, I mean, it's just so, like I said, I read just a chapter or 2, and then I start Googling, and I'm lost for a year.
Oh, thanks, man. No, I mean, yeah, we want them to encourage people to do their own research, right? So it's like, they're dense. They're dense, but yeah, the idea is to inspire people to fill in as much as they can with their own research that can just add to the story, right? Because it's universal history. You could always unpack it. So it's always a difficult balance to say, like, how much do we simplify? How much do you go into unpacking the detail? And you got to kind of like make judgments along the way of like, okay, where do we condense and where do we, because you got to do both. And it's tough. Some people oversimplify way too much to the point that it's almost useless, even though a lot of what they're saying in these these research books on especially when they deal with conspiracies and secret societies, I've had to read a lot of them. And yeah, they're almost useless how much they simplify because they don't prove what they're saying. And then because of the tendency of oversimplifying things, it allows in a lot of lazy fake narratives that have been placed into the minefield in order to deflect researchers away from the real trail of things, right? So for me, and this is again where Cynthia came in so handy with her insights of the connection between, in this case, it was the UFO phenomenon as the basis of a new revamping of a world religion where all of the gods and deities would be redefined as aliens. So that there was an idea that the mystery cults that organize the worst of our systems in our current society are very, very much tied directly to things like the cult of Mithra, the cult of, oh yeah, there's some there's some images of what we're being shown even on CNN now. This is going all like mainstream, right?
Oh yeah.
UFO disclosure phenomenon. It's like,
well, you called it, and I thank God for you because I read your report on the Rockefellers' connection to the Clintons and MK Ultra, and like I grew up brainwashed through the X-Files and wanting to believe in aliens, and I had alien autopsy, and it was like religion. I have all the alien gear, and this like really broke that spell. And this the truth is stranger than fiction, and then just diving into what's really going on is even stranger than what they're telling us with the drones and all that.
It also, really is, right?
When you were bringing up Hitler changing the scripture, and I don't know if it's scripture, but rechanging the Bible to turn people into maybe more of a Templar warrior cult. We were talking about how the same kind of thing happened with the Templars a year or so ago, where they needed to get rid of the whole love thy neighbor forgiveness and turn people into this, let's go out and pillage. It seems sort of things, and the Nazis are the new Templars. At least that's what they branded themselves as.
Absolutely, dude. That's a great insight. And that's what Heinrich Himmler was overseeing, the new Templar order at his infamous Wewelsburg Castle, which is an occult castle that had already existed, but he revamped it, used a bunch of slave labor to like add some some geometry and some more occult architecture to it. And that was the headquarters of what was supposed to be sort of the nerve center of the new global religion that they were intending on bringing online. And seems there's a lot of research that points to child sacrifice, like the worst types of things you could possibly imagine were being done at Wewelsburg, with a round table of high initiates around Himmler, who idealized the Grail myths of King Arthur. They had their own like mystical, relationship through Wagner. Wagner was their big gateway on how to think about King Arthur, who was actually a really great guy. Like I'm actually looking at a friend of mine, Jerry Therrien, did a class for the Rising Tide Foundation a few months ago on the real King Arthur from the 6th century, which had nothing to do with these Templar propaganda manuals that were being pushed in the 11th and 12th century to promote the Crusades, and that inspired Wagner and the Nazis. The real King Arthur was actually like an awesome human being who like did so much to defeat the mystery cults that were operating in Roman Londinium and Ireland and Wales back in the 6th century. They've never forgiven King Arthur for that. So that's the way they work, right? They try to, if they can't completely destroy something that is removed, that is challenging their power, they'll try to co-opt it and make it their own and then redefine it, which is where, again, like people today, they associate Benjamin Franklin with evil Hellfire Club child killer, right? George Washington, evil Freemason. Me too. Right. I was telling people for a couple of years, like basically stuff that I was reading, and they found the bones of children in the London flat he was staying at underground, and I mean it. So they couldn't, because this is a guy who has done the most as a brilliant grand strategist to organize systems to break away from the oligarchy's hereditary control mechanism. And he did it by understanding evil very much. He infiltrated Hellfire Club operations when he was younger, and was being, taught and mentored by Cotton Mather, by the whole like patriotic Republican movement in the colonies in the 1710s to 20s that were battling the Hellfire Club witch covens that had penetrated into America in the early colonies. There was a big fight going into the 1660s, 1670s by patriots who were holding the fort of this better view of humankind as a species made in the image of a living, loving, reasonable God. And we're always at war with these Hellfire Club penetrations that Benjamin Franklin's older brother was overseeing in Philadelphia. And Benjamin Franklin, the younger son of 10 kids, was like recruited to infiltrate his brother's thing to get intelligence back, and then like to Cotton Mather and the Cotton Mather faction to better understand the nature and the methods of the empire, and then to use that knowledge in a way that would create a counter strategy that would then be able to set the stage for what became the American Revolution in 1776. So they couldn't get rid of that. They couldn't end that fact, especially after the war was won. So what they did is they went to work for 2 centuries or more trying to co-opt the image of Benjamin Franklin as their own. That's always what they do. And they did the same thing to Arthur and the Templars. And as you said, that's exactly, as the high-level SS killers saw themselves as new Templars, the Templars themselves were a synthetic cult creation by a leading Cistercian grand strategist named Bernard de Clairvaux and several other Cistercians, which are sort of like a more radical branch of Benedictines from the Benedictine order, that drafted a charter for the Templars to basically justify why the new Christianity must involve bloodletting, purgative violence, killing the pagan in order to do Jesus's will, which was like not an easy sell, because there's a lot of like messaging in the Bible around love your neighbor, love your enemy, turn the other cheek. Like a lot of that stuff is not compatible if you want to weaponize a religion and justify forever wars against, Muslims and Jews and Christians against Christians. If you want to do that, you got to find a way to like seriously redefine what it means to be a Christian. So that's what Bernard de Clairvaux did with the Templar Charter, and that's what Hitler did, or whoever wrote the Reichsbible, which is probably a team. They were doing the same thing.
Well, like Mein Kampf, it was just interesting to learn that that was written by a Jesuit when he was in prison. Like, so I thought it was just Hitler who wrote that book, but there's always just different hands in the pot of what's
Yeah.
going on. And Trump's picks, like with the guy, I don't really know too much what's going on. I just see a lot of the Templar symbolism of
Me
like
too.
the dude's tattoos, and I'm just like, whoa, oh my god, this is
Yeah,
wild.
Pete Hegseth. Yeah. Is he still a contender? Is he? I wasn't sure if at a certain point he had gotten removed from being an appointee because of some sexual misconduct he had, or is he still on the list?
You know, I kind of have not looked and kind of tuned out of the politics.
Yeah.
What is interesting though, that I do have a question for you, and I know you have some screen share that you could do as well. But you wrote this book, which I have not read yet, and I'm excited. Like the thing is, it's like you read just a couple chapters, then you're lost for a year on those chapters. But the Venetian roots of Venice, now we got this thing called a Doge, and it just reminds me of the Doge of Venice. Um, what's it called? The Department of
Government efficiency.
yeah, I don't know if that ever makes you think of like the whole thing Doge and
Oh
Venice.
yeah. No, I think it's a total joke. Yeah, and I think the official like exoteric messaging that they're putting out is that they're saying, oh, it just means, like they had Elon say, oh, it just means do good every day.
Do good
That's all
every
it
day.
is. Don't
Do
read
good
into
every
it.
day. Yeah,
Yeah,
don't look
sure.
into what do. That's funny. Yeah. So
No, I totally think that there's probably a bit of a there's always multi-layered aspects to some of these decisions. But I do think that you're right to make that association with the system of the Doge.
have you ever been to Venice?
No, I don't want to go to Venice. I'm
It,
okay from a
it,
distance.
it's scary over there. Do you think that the power structures still operate out of there, or they don't really care about a like nationality or national homeland?
Oh, no, I do think that that's probably a very influential hub
Mm.
to this very day, I believe. Yeah.
There's so much to learn. There's so much to learn. I don't know much about it, but that's my New Year's goal is to go through this book,
Cool.
the Anglo Venetian. That's my goal.
All right, sweet. Yeah, so I
Do
mean
you,
that's pretty much it for volume 1. I mean, as far as the ancient, so it maps out, to recapitulate, it maps out the ancient mystery cults of Cybele, Attis,
oh,
Isis. The three dominant mystery cults that were at war with Christianity in the early years was Cybele, Attis, Mithra, and Isis,
mm-hmm.
Isis Serapis. So it sort of like maps out how they worked, what they were, how they worked to subvert, first destroy Christianity from the outside, Roman torches, stuff like that. And then when that didn't work, to subvert it from within. So kind of like a very similar thing as what happened to America, the United States, when the British Empire, which was basically just a Venetian takeover of England that had happened a couple of centuries earlier. But when this thing couldn't destroy America from physical force from the outside, primarily, which was the case in the War of the War of Independence, the War of 1812 was another effort to like burn Washington, destroy it by a torched earth policy. When that didn't work, they shifted gears and put more of their energy on subvert it from within, which became, the Civil War was largely a foreign induced operation to destroy America with the help of Skull and Bones, Scottish Rite operatives from both the northern and southern, like both the abolitionist movement as well as the pro-slavery movement, at the same time working together as fake opposition to tear America apart from within. When that didn't work, because again, you still had smarter people than we have today who were able to utilize political power to keep things together. When that failed, then the focus became a lot more directed towards cultural warfare, spiritual warfare primarily, to destroy the minds and morals of the society, and especially the military and political intelligence, like the intelligentsia. That had to be targeted because that's sort of the the thing that will keep a society from collapsing, whether it's in Rome, the Roman Republic, the thing that made the Roman Republic difficult for a period to fully co-opt by these mystery cults, because it was a republic for about almost 5 centuries before it became an empire. And the biggest pain in the ass of the empire was the military and intelligence class that was able to carry a tradition of patriotism with an awareness of the nature of evil that was within and without. So that's what they had to work to corrupt and destroy. And that was the point of creating the Mithraic cults, especially the Mithraic cult, was it was only for the warrior class. It was only for men. And if you wanted to be at a certain point a legionnaire or a member of the Praetorian Guard, you had to be initiated into the cult of Mithra, which had a whole identity, a dissociative identity that would be baked into that experience for you, especially as you rose through the 7 degrees or 8 degrees of initiation. There's probably 8 or 9 degrees, actually. And, that was utilizing the more masculine principle of the, and that's the symbol of Mithra killing the bull, looking over his shoulder to a solar deity on the one side of Helios, and on the other side is usually a representation of the other deity, a lunar deity, a goddess deity like Cybele, who are always sort of conjoined in the imagery. And it was always in underground caverns representing the sort of the womb of the Earth Mother. So it's still kind of an Earth Mother cult, even though no women were allowed. Though there was, from the researchers I've looked at, second, third degree, there was an encouragement of tapping into your female energy. So there was a certain homosexual initiatory aspect of it. Later on, there does seem to be evidence of bestialization as another part of the next phase. And even though biological men were only allowed to be in it, it did work in conjunction with the other cult, which would have had a bit more of a feminine organizational process around the cult of Cybele Attis. Oh, yeah. And the Skull and Bone Society that I'm seeing you type in right now does have a direct reference to the cult of Mithra, for sure, 100%.
Right.
As well
so
as...
You got these... Let me get, so I understand. It's the Roman... it was a republic. Rome was a republic. And then it turned into an empire. Then they built this mystery cult to give to the Roman soldiers, this Mithra. And so that was sort of kind of how these mystery cults kind of hijack these upper echelon, like military, like higher patriotic. And then the Skull and Bones did kind of the same thing here with the North and the South. And they're like straight connected symbolically to Mithra in a sense. I don't know too much, but I do know that there is that connection. That's why I pulled it up, because
they were, and this is where I'm doing a bit of research right now, and we'll just share notes, right? But I know I'm getting a sense that the Skull and Bones Society is connected to the creation of the Cambridge Apostles, which also had its creation in the same year in 1833. So the Cambridge Apostles seems to have been a more controlling hand behind the junior branch of this oligarchy. Oh, this is 1820, so this is a little bit earlier, right? Whereas the Skull and Bones is 1833, right? But there's definitely some sort of a guiding hand, and the Cambridge Apostles also seems to have a relationship with what's known as the Phoenix Society of Oxford. Now, the Phoenix Society was created in 1780s, and the Phoenix Society, there's overlap of the membership, the families between them and the apostles. The Phoenix Society themselves was created the same year that the Hellfire Club stopped existing. So the Phoenix, and it was Sir Francis Dashwood, who was the head of the Hellfire Club for 40 years. His nephew, another Dashwood, was the founder of the Phoenix Society. So we know that the Hellfire Club was itself a Rosicrucian, Mithraic sort of cult set up to take control of England as England was being transformed from being an authentic nation into an empire that oversaw the infusion of these occult Kabbalists, Rosicrucians like John Dee, Robert Flood later on, Francis Bacon later on, So part of that involved the creation of an occult branch of espionage that baked itself into and corrupted the minds and morals of the intelligentsia. Some of the better people had to be killed. Some of them could be corrupted. I'm saying, when I say the better people, I'm talking about, people like Cardinal Morton or Thomas More had to be just outright murdered. Other ones had to be expelled, like Erasmus, or some were corrupted. And all of that, having these elitist exotic clubs, that brought its members closer to positions of real power, was something that was a seduction for too many younger people, which they fell into. So that's one of the uses. There's many, but one of the uses is the exclusivity factor to corrupt the minds and morals of the elites of a society you want to take over, so that they willfully become like, look at, the third, fourth generation kids of a lot of the American founding fathers who gave so much and risked so much in the War of Independence. Then you look at like John Quincy Adams' sons and grandsons, and they're the most terrible satanic human beings in the world. You're like, how could you just, let go of your family tradition to that extent? It's pathetic and sad. But that's one of the ways it works. So all that to say, that's
kind of the cycle.
That's the cycle, yeah. So you really have to find a way. That's why you really need a really high quality culture that can pass on the moral values in a way which is not strict. Like, good culture is playful, but it's also rigorous. Like Beethoven said when describing his method, he's like, I strive to make music as rigorous as it is free. So you have to have that liberating freedom. And the oligarchical cultures, the way that they control themselves, because they have to self-control, they got to permeate this unnatural sense of identity into future generations. That ain't easy to do when it's so out of whack with common sense and basic matters of conscience. So what they gotta do is make cultural movements that are either totalitarian strict on the one side. So you got like a lot of the boarding school experiences of rich kids at Eton College, which is highly abusive, or in these hyper strict Anglican, cultures that produced Aleister Crowley. Like, look at the strict Plymouth Brethren cult, this Christian cult that produced all of these Satanists. There was many Satanists that came out of the Plymouth Brethren, but it produces that effect because it's so rigidly strict, and kids are induced to be terrified that they're gonna like burn in hell forever because they thought about boobies or whatever. And you do that enough to enough kids, some kids are going to come out of that process as practitioners of the strict formalism, the soul deadening formalism, and they'll just carry on that abuse. A lot of other kids are going to come out as rebels, Luciferian rebels to that tyrannical force that says, no, I'm going to do the opposite. And there you have people like Aleister Crowley coming out saying, okay, I believe in the general cosmology. And to the end of his days, he maintained his adherence to John Nelson Darby, the founder of the Plymouth Brethren's general cosmology of premillennial dispensationalism and rapture. He believed that, and he described it. But he just said, no, instead of trying to be on the side of angels, I just decided to side with the Antichrist, to channel that instead. That's John Nelson Darby, yeah, the guy who founded the current rapture theory that's so dominant amongst so many Christian communities.
Yeah, I mean, this is where it gets so interesting. Like, the truth is stranger than fiction. Like, how could you put that like together? That will be done as well is Crowley, who got that from this Hellfire Club, who got it from the Assassin. Everything's permissible. And this is interesting. He was born on November 18th, which is a day that pops up a lot. It's the 322 day of the year. It's the day that Adam Weishaupt of the Illuminati died. And it's also since we were talking about UFOs, I wanted to bring up the drones in New Jersey. That's the day it started, was on November 18th. And they make sure to write the sightings began on November 18th. So just an interesting day. And I think that uh, even though it sounds like wild, but I do think that they pick certain days for ritual. And it seems like Evola, he was into the Kali Yuga cycle or something like that. So like astrology plays a role in a lot, and this is just something that I've noticed quite a
Yeah.
bit. It
No,
happens a lot.
it does. And yeah, like these astrologer types, like they do really, to what degree at the end of the day does the upper echelon, like the top level management, believe in the things that they promote? I'm uncertain. But definitely they think in terms of ages and aeons. They don't think in terms of decades or even centuries. They do think in, like, for example, well, I won't even show that. But
How long is an age, would you say?
well, it depends on the cultural theory, but like from an astronomical standpoint and the precession of the equinox, it's a little over 2,000 years from like
Oh,
this is where you have, like we are still in the age of Pisces, and that's sort of like where you have the rising. So there's something called, so the precession of the equinox is like over 24,000 years, where you could look at where the sun is rising in the early morning compared to the backdrop of the celestial sphere of the night sky, and it could be rising every morning in Leo, and it will do that for a sustained period until at a certain point it'll start moving and rising in Taurus or whatever one is next to the age of the bull. So that's like one of the theories of like why, because there's many theories about like why is Mithra killing the bull. Some people say it was because maybe the Mithra cult was created to usher in or to exit the age of Taurus. That's one theory. I don't think it's just one thing. That might be one of the possible truths.
then you
Right.
got
So
the astrology all above him right
yeah,
here, the different
exactly.
zodiacs.
Yeah, and there's almost always some representation of the astronomical, like the 12 astronomical signs with Mithra inside of the Mithraeum, the underground caverns. So that's possible. But so
And
the idea is that we're now entering the age of Aquarius, which was sort of the template for the creation of the baby boomer generation that was sort of targeted for social engineering, the kids born after World War II. That were sort of the second iteration of the Wundervogels of Germany. So what they did to create the hard killer SS of Germany in the earlier pre-World War I period with the Wundervogel back to nature movement is sort of what they tried to retool and do it again, but with the entirety of the transatlantic youth this time around, Europe and North America especially, that were given heavy doses of hedonistic sensualism wrapped with nihilistic philosophies of Sartre, of Derrida, and other philosophers that basically had Nietzsche, that had a very existential worldview that in conjunction. So if you have a psychospiritually vapid way of intellectualizing the purpose of creation and being on the one hand, and then you have a hypersensual sex, drugs, and rock and roll lifestyle that you're being sort of fed with at the same time as the world is being driven more crazy, and like your brothers are coming back in body bags from wars that America should never have been in, and your heroes, like people who are good people like Martin Luther King, are being killed and JFK are being murdered. You don't know how to make sense of that type of world. So you can obviously easily become a very, very disjointed person who has an unhealthy relationship to the sensual, hedonistic side of being, and a sick, no ability to answer the questions of why this is all happening, because you've got a whole bunch of philosophers promoted in your schools through UNESCO, through the new takeover of our schooling systems that happened in the 50s and 60s, that are promoting the reading of Aldous Huxley, or Catcher in the Rye, you know, as like mandatory reading, which is designed to make you like, again, confused and misanthropic. That's the point of those stories and the point of those authors, who are both, including J.D. Salinger, who was working with American intelligence. He was tied to the CIA. You know, Aldous Huxley was not warning us of shit. He was like part of the eugenics transhumanist movement that oversaw the creation of Esalen. He directly oversaw the creation of the Esalen Institute, that was sort of a new Mithraic hub inside of America to oversee the transformation of the military. It was Esalen that directly, and this is also in book volume 1 of the series, is how Esalen worked with the Stanford Research Institute in order to, you know, create psychic soldiers, paranormal investigations in the military that brought in the revolution in military affairs. And you had people like Colonel Thomas Aquino, Colonel Michael Aquino, who directly saw himself as the inheritor, the reincarnation of Aleister Crowley. He emulated himself on Crowley entirely. He believed he was the Antichrist, and just like Crowley thought that he was ushering in the age of Horus, this 1,000-year Reich of darkness, so too did Aquino give it his own twist, but believed, you know, that he was ushering in the age of Seth, which is why he created the Temple of Set. That worked closely with Anton LaVey's Church of Satan. And so this guy Aquino, who was a Green Beret Operation Phoenix leader, worked very closely with Edward Lansdale, worked very closely with other people who were tied to the Scientology movement around Hal Puthoff at the Stanford Research Institute. These guys oversaw Mind Wars, the sponsorship of psychic soldiers, the Star Wars, the Jedi Knight, the Jedi Warrior program inside of the U.S. military at Fort Bragg. And that became what oversaw and indoctrinated a new age of military elite that went on to do the planning for Iran-Contra, for Desert Storm, for 9/11. Now we're several generations for QAnon, by the way, also was Michael Aquino and this other guy, Paul Valalay, and this third dude. This other guy.
You got a book on that? Or an article on that goes deep into the whole Q psyop?
Yeah, well, the third guy in that story that plays a big role is Steve Pietzenuk, who is an assistant to Henry Kissinger and Cyrus Vance and another secretary of Secretary of State of the U.S. So this guy was assistant secretary of 3 high-level players. He was Trilateral Commission. He became like Alex Jones's guru some years ago. And it seems to me that he was like the key coordinator of he co-wrote creative predictive programming books with Tom Clancy. Like he co-wrote 10 books with Tom Clancy. So, you know, these guys are practicing creative writing and how to like give off stories that would that like we were talking about with the Illuminati thing, right? Like how they would create stories that would capture a certain degree of truthfulness about the reality of conspiracies, but then inoculate people from becoming potent by understanding what it was that they were looking at. So there are conspiracies for good and for bad in history, including in today. You know, you got people who conspire to make things happen. And these guys, what they started doing is they started promoting a narrative that would take the basic precepts of theosophy, the belief that the world is shaped by a great white lodge of white hats and a great black lodge of black hats operating between angels and demon forces, and that's what people like Winston Churchill believed, Milner believed that, Nestor Webster, like all of these theosophist types. Oswald Mosley believed in the great white lodge of ascended masters interfacing with the elites through Rosicrucian initiations that you could access through Eleusinian mysteries if you're one of the white hats. And if you're not, and then you would speak in coded language using like sort of Kabbalistic reductive symbolism in your language of communication, which only an elite could know because you've passed through the tests and you have the cipher. So with the cipher that you've gotten, you can then interpret what's being said that other people couldn't because they don't have the cipher. And that's the way like systems have always been managed by the empire for thousands of years. It's all that's the value of cipher. That's why they hate Edgar Allan Poe. So Edgar Allan Poe, who comes up in my volume 3.
So the stamp we were talking about, this Oh my God, there's the horns are honking. I guess
It's like an American thing for New Year's or what?
no, it's somebody's car alarm's going off. It's good now. But
Okay.
yeah, we're gonna have fireworks. It's gonna be
Nice.
wild, for sure tonight. I'll cover the New Year's. They always do a big ritual, it seems like, with celebrities. So I'll be keeping an eye out on all of it. But the real New Year's, I look at it through the Chinese zodiac mostly. The dragon year will end on January 28th. So I kind of look at things astrologically through there. The Jewish New Year happened months ago. So there's New Year's for different calendars, lunar calendar. But anyway, you were talking about
Well, that's kind of like why I find it. Sorry, I'm just on that note.
Ahead.
That's why I kind of find the occult obsession with carrying out activity based upon calendar and astronomical systems. Well, astronomical would make more sense to me. With I would imagine that more messed up things happen on, let's say, a solar eclipse, versus any other random day, or like when there's particular like planets in alignment or in certain conjunctures or having certain internal angular meanings like 60 degrees or 45 degrees or something. Like I could see them. That makes more sense to me why they would make those decisions. But for those decisions that are made purely, and they are, I agree with you, on like November, what did you say, 3rd?
November 18th.
November 18th of a certain, or September 11th.
Yeah.
Just for the sake of the numbers, it's kind of a joke to me because it's like, it's all arbitrary at the end of the day. Like just the fact that you even have that, it's that choice of calendar system, it could have been the Julian calendar, the Gregorian calendar. We're constantly tweaking the things with daylight savings times and, in broader cycles, everything's getting off shifted with whenever you try to impose one of these formal systems of number onto planetary motions. Nothing kind of works perfectly. So it is arbitrary, but they do take it seriously. I agree. It's just a bit of I chuckle a bit.
Yeah. And like you can see it with the Economist magazine. I don't know if you ever look into those covers, how it seems they call it future gazing. So they're forecasting, but is it like a predictive programming, or is it just a way that they can sell, their issues more? But there seems to be some kind of eerie connections to events that happen with their covers. And there's this conjunction of like 6 planets or something happening this year, right before the inauguration in America on January 20th. So it's something I've been looking at for a while. I think that there's something to it. It's interesting. And it sparks, like, it's part of the fun as well. I like what you were talking about, how a society, they got to know how to be strict and also have a little fun. I have too much fun. My friend tells me I need to get my head on my ass and start working. And so and I could see that. So this year, January, I'm going to be working hard. That's going to be my thing, is I'm going to go harder on the working. And we were talking about cleaning and like also like feng shui and just having a clean home. There's a reflection to the mental health as well, that things are better when they're organized as well. So there is something going on. This has been just an awesome conversation, and we only covered like the first book. I want to know about Edgar Poe a little bit.
Well, yeah, and that dovetails off of what we were just saying before the little mini break, is that ciphers and cryptology is very important for the sorcerers. So the way that these occult mystery schools maintain continuity is by always keeping the allure, the mystique of secret knowledge knowable only through some experience of gnosis for an inner elite. And everybody wants to be part of the inner club. You want to be part of the inner ring. So you're always going to like the Scientologists who have defected. We hear stories of like how much work they had to do, how much testing they had to go through, how much money they had to pay in order to like go to the next level in this multi-phase initiatory system of OT, like operating thetan 1 to 9, then all of the grades above that. And you hear them talking about how they were shocked and kind of disappointed in many cases about the story of, like, oh, the big secret has been that there was this galactic federation and all of these dematerialized alien beings were sent down, locked up in volcanoes, and like, got blown up with hydrogen bombs, and and then the next phase is like, oh, and by the way, they're occupying our bodies and every particle, and we're all inhabited by billions of these foreign alien entities that are trying to cause us to be unnatural, and that we can heal ourselves and shed, kind of like an exorcism, right? If we go along with L. Ron Hubbard's techniques.
For a small fee.
Huh?
For a small fee, we can.
For a small fee, and you always just pay a little bit more, and you always do a little bit more, and you're always chasing the dragon because you're always promised, but it's gonna be satisfying in the next phase. So just push through, take the pain, and then you'll really be enlightened. And everybody wants to get that gnosis. And maybe some of them are happy. Maybe some of them, like, doors are opened in power and fame and money, and they're, become a Tom Cruise who's like all in. But a lot of them aren't. They're just always perpetually dissatisfied and hungry for what's behind the next door. So it's kind of one of the techniques that have been developed over the millennia has been the utilization of ciphers. And the cipher is a powerful tool because like cryptography in general, right? Not partially, it's powerful for good and for bad, as far as just espionage, carrying out, coordinating activity amongst broad suite, like, if you're separated by dozens or hundreds of miles or thousands of miles with people you need to collaborate with, and along the way your messages could be captured by the enemy. Yeah, use a cipher. Great. That's how the American Revolution happened. That's how everything good ever happened. But inversely, they will also use that because you can make a cipher based on anything, right? Whatever the key is, you just make the key, and then all of a sudden, whoever controls the original key can make ciphers and ciphers within ciphers and ciphers within ciphers within ciphers. And then you could put those out, so that people will try to decrypt Crowley's Book of the Law, which is a cipher, which does have several layers of cipher key associated with the Book of the Law that he so-called had transmitted by Eowa, some demon, through his Scarlet, woman witch in 1904 that gave him the thelema. But so you read it, and there's like one exoteric reading for the uninitiated, and then if you have one of the keys, then you can see another set of codes. Look at every 30 second letter, and just add them all together. You'll get a different set of messages, and then you got another key that will be even higher, and that'll take like every 13th letter added, +3 for every third step, and then you subtract another 7, and then like it can get quite elaborate. But all I have to say, Edgar Allan Poe was doing. That's why I made him the sort of subject, the gateway into volume 3 of the book, where he was he mastered like principles of cryptography very, very well, and he was himself, as I make the case in the first chapter, a member of America's Society of the Cincinnati, which was sort of a Republican society that was at war with the Rosicrucian takeover of the American lodges. So he was part of that. He's a third generation American. His grandfather was an assistant to George Washington, David Poe, and he himself was very, very immersed. Like much as Benjamin Franklin was recruited by Cotton Mather a century and a bit earlier, so too was Poe. Well, about a century earlier, recruited by these patriotic forces around John Quincy Adams, around Henry Clay, to be a part of this international movement to actualize the ideals of 1776. But in 1830, when he had come out of West Point, he was operational within France at the time, where Marquis de Lafayette had a big network, including Samuel Finley, Cooper, Morse. So you had Samuel Morse, the guy who develops the Morse code, who was also a painter, who was part of this network operating within France. You had, that's him. You had Cooper, the James Fenimore Cooper was also in France at the same time, who was a literary figure who was exposing for Americans, right, making like literature that would help Americans understand through art the nature of the Venetian methods, which he does in things like the Bravo. So Cooper, that's the Morse code system that he popularized and developed quite a bit. James Fenimore Cooper, like I said, was a multi-generational Society of Cincinnatus member, and he as well, if you read his writings, he's exposing the Venetian operations. He's exposing the Swiss Anglo-Venetian operations as well in many of his so-called fictional books, and they were all closely tied together. They were all friends together, working together in counter-espionage. So Poe is a master cryptographer. He's a mathematician. But he's also a poet. And that's, as he makes the point in his Purloined Letter and many of his short stories, he makes the clear point that if you were just a mathematician, you would be an incompetent thinker. If you're just a poet or just an artist, you would be incompetent at carrying out any type of political intelligence. But the most effective human being is he who develops both at the same time as best as possible, and so has that rigorous discipline that you could only get if you can really immerse yourself in an understanding of physics and science, but at the same time, a playfulness that only the creative poet can have by being able to bounce around and play with those ideas and not just be so rigidly obedient to the formulas themselves. And so what he does, Poe, is he's challenging his readers to send him encrypted messages that he unravels every week as the editor of various magazines in America. That's what's making him famous. He's like, nobody can beat me. And he does. He figures it out every single time. And on top of that, he's showcasing what his methods are that he's making the point. Anybody can do this if they put their minds to it. He also does a short story called The Gold Bug. And in The Gold Bug, it's a cipher. Like, the whole thing is, to this very day, a very elaborate cipher that he challenges people. He's like, this is the way to hone your mind. If you're going to be involved in counterintelligence, you need to be able to decipher things like the Gold Bug story, which to this very day, there's scholars who still haven't figured it out. Like, they're still trying to like unravel what he did.
Wow.
Yeah. So you got all of this stuff that Poe is doing on every level. And so I tried to tell the story utilizing both a mixture of his poems, of his more famous stories, to get across that, number one, the image of him as this morbid, death-fixated opium addict or laudanum, whatever the hallucinogenic drug was that they say he was addicted to. That's a complete fiction created by his enemies. None of that's true. He's actually one of the most noble souls I've ever experienced reading my life. Such a power. And they did kill him. They assassinated him, which is also why I called it the last mystery, or Poe's last what did I call it? Edgar Poe's final mystery. Yeah.
Wow.
And I what I tried to do over the course of several chapters is I took his Tales of Ratiocination, so this method of analysis that combines the poetic faculties and the scientific faculties, exhibited in the figure that he created. Inspector Charles Dupin is this investigator. He created the true crime novel, like the idea of the detective novel. He created that entire genre.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was that book called, or that poem?
There were three Inspector Dupin stories that Poe created.
Okay. Inspector
One was
Dupin.
Yeah, and one was.
I remember you talking about this on our last podcast.
Right.
Yes, it's coming back. Okay.
Yeah. So these tales, they came through studies of debunking mystics and spiritualists that were trying to convince Americans that machines could think for themselves and could ultimately replace humans. Sound familiar?
That's hilarious. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you had these things called the chess playing Turk, which
Right.
was promoted by this fellow, this Masonic occultist named Maelzel, and he was an Austrian Viennese enemy of Beethoven, who was touring this robot that I think he plagiarized. I think he stole a robot. It was originally created just for entertainment, and the robot could play chess. And the idea was, and there were many of these robots created. They were called automaton, and they would tour Europe and tour the courts and tour. They started touring America in the 1830s, and Poe was pissed because a lot of people were becoming seduced, thinking, "Oh, these machines are beating really good human chess players," and people started thinking, well, I guess the machine is either that we are just machines that are inferior to these better quality machines, or these machines are infused by some spiritual ghostly force, which in both cases, whichever extreme of the spectrum you chose to go with, it was both going to be destructive. And what Poe does is he demonstrates in his Maelzel's chess player short story in I think it's 1839 or 1840, that the thing is a hoax, and he demonstrates that there must be a human being operating within the body of the machine itself that's making it work. And he goes through how that hoax works, and his proof is so concise and so explosively true and reasonable that it destroys this operation, and nobody goes to see the chess players anymore in America, or the right.
And you saying, how does this sound familiar? It's like totally familiar too with the chess in the Neuralink. How the first person who got this new Neuralink is playing chess, and all the imagery is just like this chess thing. Like, what if this isn't even like real? Like, it's just a fictional story, or maybe it is real. I don't know, but it's funny.
It's so easy to fake. Like, if it is okay. So, and Poe makes this point too. If people read his Maelzel's chess player, it's maybe like 10 pages. It's not a long thing. But he makes the point that even if this machine is beating humans at chess, that's still not a proof that the machine is better than humans, because chess itself is fake creativity. It's all based on rigid rules and a closed system where human beings are not limited to that type of fixed rigidity or closed system thinking. Human beings can break out of that when we're creative. And it's only when we're not creative and our creative powers are broken that we think like computers, and then we can become demoralized. So Poe's like, even on that level, it's a failure. But he's like, on a deeper level, I can prove that there is a dude who is a human inside of the machine playing this thing. And they have like doors that open with like elaborate gears. And he makes the point, like, these elaborate gears, because, this dude Maelzel, who's touring like a magician, and showing the audience, look, there's nothing in the machine. There's 3 doors, and he opens each door individually. And in each door that opens, it has these gears. And Poe makes the point, like, the gears have no role to play in the machine. Like, they're useless gears. They're just there for optics. There's no justification. When you ask him, why are those gears the way they are, he has no answer. So it's just there to hide the person who's behind the gears. There's nothing. It's not filled with anything. Right. That's a little demonstration right there. And all that to say, so in the case of this Neuralink guy, how easy would it be for some other actual master chess player or whatever to be operating the thing, and he's just, for whatever reason, playing along? Like, it all depends upon us believing that everybody's honest in this game. So
I got a funny image I took of the guy, and because the Neuralink, it would seem like it's like a mark of the beast, and they interviewed the guy. This is the first guy that gets the Neuralink, and he's got like the original American flag. He's got a cross on his hat. I've never seen anyone wear a cross on their hat, but he's like this typical like Christian American who gets the Neuralink, which would be like the mark of the beast. So I feel like there's a lot of
propaganda. They're marketing it for a certain target audience.
Yeah, that's what it seems
like. Yeah, I could identify with that guy. Yeah, no, exactly.
So Edgar Allan Poe, Sherlock Holmes. What's that all about? How
That's
you said
great.
that was to destroy Edgar Allan Poe's Dupin.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle represents everything that Poe fought against, as far as his personality as an imperialist, a devoted race patriot who was, an admirer of Cecil Rhodes. He was a leading member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, along with Aleister Crowley. He
Wow.
he was a leading member of the Society for Psychical Research, as well. And from my assessment, the guy was a complete sociopath. I think he was also very much involved within the occult ritual of the Jack the Ripper murders in Whitechapel, London in 1888. And he develops the character of Sherlock Holmes as a vicious sort of parody of Inspector Charles Dupin by Poe earlier. And in the case of Sherlock Holmes, like, it was proven by none other than Harry Houdini himself, who was a sort of frenemy of Doyle some years later. Houdini was an actual follower of Poe and Poe's method. So Poe's spirit is really living on, not in an esoteric way, but I mean in the sense that Houdini was doing and inspired by Poe's method of ratiocination. That was his method of creative analysis. That's his purpose as an American patriot, debunking this new spiritualist religion that was being promulgated inside of America, with people going to channelers, necromancers, people operating Ouija boards and astrologers that were penetrating Washington, D.C. Calvin Coolidge had his own personal astrologer. You had these sort of Vril Society witches being brought into the White House, being brought into, all of these things. And it was really designed and to create a new Gnostic revival to replace conventional schools of traditional morality, and that in the case of America, that were embodied within the Judeo-Christian ethic that saw that there was one God, that we're made in the image of one God, not many gods, but one God that has purpose and infuses reason and beauty into the universe. And that concept that also rejects child sacrifice, human sacrifice, which is very big in the Old Testament. Like, anybody who reads the Old Testament, Book of Kings, Leviticus, read Chronicles, you're going to see a theme of prophets attacking Baal, the cult of Moloch, the idea of sacrificing your children to the gods. That is attacked vehemently. It's probably the most effective form of counterattack against the system of human sacrifice ever before. And then it was taken even further with Christianity in the story that, we don't have to sacrifice living things at all, because, you got the new lore that, Jesus was the final sacrifice. We don't have to do any of that anymore. We can move on now to the more mature phase of being human. So that's something that the oligarchy never forgave Jews or Christians for, and they've been really working hard to destroy that. So this is what was being done by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle when he was trying to create this new revival. And this is what Harry Houdini was debunking by demonstrating that it wasn't secret powers that were being wielded by many of these necromancers and mediums. It was, and he was basically saying, look, I could do exactly what they can do, whether it's on the magic tricks or whether it's on channeling, whatever they're doing, I can do it, but I can do it for reasons that are reasonably understandable by everybody. And he showcases how those are. So he's taking you into the sausage factory, showing you how the sausages are made, and bringing everyone in for that journey. And which is why they also had, like they had to kill Poe, they had to kill Houdini. But Houdini was also a big fan of Poe, and he made the point that Doyle plagiarized many of his Sherlock Holmes stories, including his first one, Studies in Scarlet, from Edgar Allan Poe's Purloined Letter by Dupin, which is the story of right.
Oh, is he
You know,
part of the Knights of Malta too?
probably. Yeah, they're
That's on his Wikipedia.
Is it really? Yeah, okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of these high level guys, the Knights of Malta or the Knights of Saint John, which is the same thing. They tend to be.
It's just
um,
funny. Like that's why I look at. I see the symbols, and I'm like, I'm just on the Conan. His Wikipedia got that. Wow.
yeah. So yeah, all that to say, so Poe, he destroyed just like Houdini did later. Poe did so much to destroy this pagan Gnostic revival that the transcendentalists that were then under the sway of the northern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite, people like Ralph Waldo Emerson, who's that guy? Thoreau, Henry David Thoreau, were all like members of this movement that was also very closely aligned to the growth of the spiritualist movement of the Fox sisters and, the ghost rappings, all these things that were becoming a craze. It grew out of the Second Great Awakening through the state of New York and the burnt over district, where you had all of these religious cults that were just like coming online left and right. The Oneida cult that later on produced the assassin that killed James Garfield. All of these proto-communist cults where they would just like abolish private property and everybody was allowed to have sex with everybody. And, you always had this top guru, like in the case of the Oneida cult, it was this Yale Divinity School guy, Noyes, who was, this new Messiah type of character, like a Charles Manson type. So they had these all over America, in Buffalo. They had them in Toronto. They had them everywhere. And some of them were producing, a lot of them were anarchist. I would say most of them were anarchist utopian societies that would produce a lot of anarchist assassins. They had them in Europe as well. They had them in Serbia. They had them all over Russia. That people like Mikhail Bakunin and Prince Kropotkin were overseeing. In America, you had Emma Goldman managing one of these communes that produced the killer of McKinley. In Russia, you had a bunch that produced killers that killed many Russian leaders, including the three czars. Well, two proven, the other one not proven, but I think so. Germany, same. So all that to say, this is what Poe was at war with, and so what I tried to do in that third volume is showcase what this was, what was also the unsolved mystery that Poe tried to solve. But I think he knew that there were things that couldn't be said at that time. It was too hot to go the full distance regarding the murder of Marie Roget, which was the second tale of ratiocination in 1842, which was a woman who he directly knew, who was part of a counterintelligence circle in New York, who dies a ritualistic murder. And that's actually there. Yeah, the thing your mouse is moving over on the cover of my book is the location of her murder in Hoboken, New Jersey, right across the Hudson River. And it was a tourist spot that was known as Sybil's Cave. It was they've since buried a big chunk of the cave, so it used to be lower by like 10 feet lower, and they've rebuilt the entrance in recent years. Yeah, that's it right there. And yeah, you can click on it and go down a little bit. Yeah, that's a drawing of what it looked like back then. Again, tourist spot. It had like an underground creek under the cave that would sell sort of mineral water that would have superpowers. And it was right next to, it was connected to another thing called the Eleusinian Fields. These,
Oh wow.
Yeah. And it was sponsored by the family, this I believe they're a traitorous family, but today they're still very powerful. So there's only so much I could say about them. But it's the Stevens clan. Colonel Stevens III was the overseer of this property. He owned most of Hoboken, New Jersey. And him and his kids, I believe that they're carryover Hellfire Club members, built this thing. And it was a direct homage to the original Sybil's Cave in the Apennine Mountains, which was the fabled location of the 11th Sibyl of the ancient world that was outlined by Aeneas. And you had the Delphic Sibyl. A Sibyl is basically a channeler, a real witch. That's all it is. It's a channeler, and somebody who goes into a usually psychedelic, high. There's all sorts of different, mushrooms or opiates or there's proto LSD that was abundant in the ancient world, around which you can get a hallucinogenic trip. And so these Sibyls were women who were put into a high. They were induced to mumble a bunch of cryptic messages that were interpreted by a priesthood, and that was then given to kings and generals to go to war or to make peace or whatever. And that tradition carried on even after these cults were outlawed at the Council of Nicaea. They carried on. And so one of the locations that became a central hub in the old world, especially in the medieval times, was the Apennine Mountains in right above Nursia, which is an area in Italy, very close to the coast of Amalfi, actually, which is where you have the source of the Knights of Malta cross. That's the that's the Amalfi symbol or emblem. It's Amalfi that also was sort of for a period of a few centuries, it was one of the rivals of Venice, and it was the owner of the Isle of Capri for a few centuries. And that's sort of the Mithraic hub. That's where Tiberius had his sacred orgies and human sacrifice campaigns, was in the Isle of Capri. That's where today you have like Beyonce and Jay-Z have a big estate there, and they have a lot of underground caverns and stuff in Capri. So I think it's still like a big hub of occultism even now. But yeah, so in Nursia, you have a mountain system where the original Apennine Sibyl had Sibyl's Cave, and due to some earthquakes, it got taken down in the 60s. But it's known even on their official government tourist website of the Apennine Mountains today, which is below the Apennine Mountains. You have the Elysian Fields, and you have a lake called the Lago Pilato, so Pilate's Lake, named after Pontius Pilate, who oversaw the killing of Jesus on behalf of, I think it was his uncle-in-law or something, who was Tiberius, who was the emperor who gave the order. Again, people often just like blame the Jews, but it was actually a top-down decision by the the Helios man god overseer of the cults, Tiberius, who ran his headquarters at the Isle of Capri and had his nephew-in-law, Pontius Pilate, carry out the order to kill the figure of Jesus at that time, that should receive the majority of the blame in that killing. And anyway, Pontius Pilate, as the story goes, had his body his body was buried at that lake under the Apennine Mountain with the 11th Sibyl in Nursia. So this is where, on their website, on their official website that I cite extensively, people can go to it, but it's also in my book. They admit that was the center of the Black Mass of the medieval times. They admit that that's where you had the surviving Cathars and Templars go and carry out their rituals. They admit that that's where you had human sacrifices in the 13th, 14th centuries. They admit this. They take pride in this, actually. But then they say, oh, but it was mostly white witches who were there just trying to do herbalism and herbal remedies. But they were like, but there was also this other stuff too, which is also part of our tradition that we should embrace. And within the original Sibyl's Cave, there's also the emblems engraven into the cave itself of that I couldn't find. I can only find descriptions of them, of Rosicrucian symbolism, and especially the number, the date of the mythical birth of Christian Rosenkreutz, the fictional creator of the Rosicrucian movement that was given sort of new coloring in the 16th century with the Venetian occult takeover of England. So that's also part of, it's baked into the Sibyl's Lodge that inspired the little site that is the location of Mary Rogers' murder, which was, again, a very ritualistic murder. Her fiancé, who also seems to be closely tied to the Poe, circles engaged in counterintelligence in America. Also dies there 2 months later, supposedly suicide, but I really don't believe that that's true at all. Same location. So anyway, this is part of the revenge against the Poe network, and it culminates. So what really caught my attention was that the way the media of New York in the 1840s was covering the murder of Mary Rogers, it was the first mass media blitz height that caused the psychology of all of the American people to become obsessed with mass murderers, with deep, unnecessarily gruesome descriptions of her mutilated corpse. Like, so it really like worked on the culture, the psyche of the people to introduce a morbidity within the population, which I think is a component of how the oligarchy corrupts the minds and morals of a society. And also shapes ideas of what human nature is. What are we capable of? You know, and the serial killer phenomenon is another one where a lot of people have been led to believe that there's this naturally emerging property of being human called serial killers that are just people born genetically with no conscience, that are just naturally narcissistic, that want to just kill for the sake of the pleasure of it for no other reason. And it's like, for all of these cases of serial killers, when you scratch back more critically behind the official narratives of whether it's the Zodiac killer or whether it's Jack the Ripper or whether it's the murders at the Sybil's Cave, there's always this unnatural occult practice behind it that is not an organically emergent phenomenon. It's always tied to intelligence operations that are
Son of Sam and all
Sam.
that. Yeah.
Even Michael Aquino was, it seems, I'm increasingly persuaded, was a leading organizer of the Zodiac murders in 66, 67.
Oh, for sure. I never thought about that, but that makes total sense.
Yeah.
That it was him. Or the John Wayne Gacy. It seems like there was a network with him and a network with Dahmer. And they kind of show it in the Netflix show, how the police just let him do it. They knew what he was doing, and they just were like, "Oh, continue," kind of.
Oh,
And then they have a satanic altar. Well, I mean, like, it doesn't say that's what's going on, but like that's what it seems like. But you know, Netflix is like super woke, so it was kind of just be like the police are terrible, kind of thing. This is so interesting. The whole serial killer thing and the assassin of this Luigi guy that carried out this thing in New York on Jay-Z's birthday, where they light up the Christmas tree over a Promethean statue at Rockefeller Center. I'm sure you've heard that story out here. There was this assassin who killed the CEO of a health insurance thing.
Yeah.
And people are like worshiping the guy, just like they worship the Charles Manson or whatever it is, or OJ Simpson. I remember when I was a kid, OJ Simpson was like the popular court case. There's all the different court cases and trials that just capture, I'm not sure if it's just America, but it captures the mind of America, the television shows. And this is interesting. So was this before or after Jack the Ripper?
This is a solid 47 years before Jack the Ripper. So she dies in 1841.
47 years before, like a solid, because that's the Masonic compass, the 47 Masonic compass. So who knows?
Yeah, maybe, man. I don't know.
Because the Jack the Ripper was like a Masonic like signature and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, it's actually, we could show a picture of that. Let me do a little screen share, okay? Because that was what caught my attention with this thing, was that academic researchers talking about Sybil's murder and the media hype around it. Oh, and by the way, one thing I'll just say before I say the next thing is that she was also, a case has been very persuasively made that I recapitulated in my books, that she was the last member of the Mathers family. So she was actually a direct blood descendant of Cotton Mather, who was overseeing the crackdown on the witch covens inside of the United States that was a serious battle of the 1870s, 80s, 90s, and there was a Connecticut branch where her grandfather was Elijah Mather. I think it's Elijah. No, I forget.
Is Samuel Mathers, the Order of the Golden Dawn, connected to the Mathers, Cotton Mathers
No,
at all? Okay, just wondering.
no, that's a totally different Mathers branch. No connection there that I know of. But yeah, Samuel McGregor Mathers was super bad. But so, all right. So all that to say, they worked really hard at killing off. There's this multi-generational vendetta. Like all of her uncles and aunts were killed, like died weird, mysterious deaths. Her dad died a mysterious death. Phoebe is anyway. There's a whole bunch of things, and her uncles and aunts all didn't have kids when they died early. So very weird. I do think that they did want to, like, it was a family vengeance. It was a vendetta thing.
Wow.
Let me just do a share screen here. So there's one thing that really, really, really caught my eye is that those academic researchers would say that this was like a precursor to the Jack the Ripper murders, in the sense of like the psychological effect and the media effect, like how the media engaged with the story and how it promulgated it for like 2 years. And it really had a viciously traumatic effect in the psyche of Americans. And the same way that the Jack the Ripper thing had all across the transatlantic, it was people were obsessing about the vicious murder of prostitutes in the United States and Canada that were happening in London, though. So one of the things that occupies a big chapter of that third volume is in the I published it on my Substack here, which features a picture of, Arthur Conan Doyle, W.T. Steed, Crowley, Madame Blavatsky, an illustration of Solomon's Temple, which does play a big role in volume 1, 2, and 3, is the obsession to revive Solomon's Temple, like to create a new blood and soil cult as the home base for the Antichrist. That's something that they're thinking about a lot. And one of the aspects of the murder, and you alluded to it just now, is that the location of the victims is not random. It's nobody except for one author whose name I'm forgetting, that I use quite a bit in my chapters on this topic. Edwards, that's his name. Edwards. Let me get the full name just to do him justice. Ivor Edwards. He did a book called Jack the Ripper's Black Magic Ritual. I don't know if can this be seen? Yeah, okay, it can be seen. And he analyzes the location of the murders, and he makes the point: the distance from victim 1 to victim 2 is 930 yards, victim 2 to victim 4, 930, victim 3 to victim 4, 950 yards, victim 3 to victim 5, 950 yards, and then distances from the center of site 3, 4, and 5 is 500 yards each. So you got like 5 victims that are recognized to be part of that one ritual that occurred between like a 13-week period in 1888. And so you just look at it, the location, as Edwards makes the point, if you look at a map, it's the Vesica Pisces, it's the overlapping of 2 circles, which does have occult significance. And I go through what that occult significance is as far as the merging of opposites, the infusing. It's known. The word itself, Pisces, is a reference to the fish, the Vesica, the bladder. So one of the references is of the bladder of the fish, representing the age of Pisces, is one interpretation of it. I got a few images here that people can see. It comes up a lot in religious iconography as a womb. Sort of, you can see how this would definitely showcase an imagery of the womb of the divine virgin. That's one aspect of the meaning of it that's infused into certain symbologies. You also have, and there's other images that we see here, often featuring the Virgin Mary. The occultists, however, like the Cistercian grand strategists that shaped the Templars, or the Vril Society SS that wrote the Reichsbank, the Reichsbible, they play with the idea of Mary and the ambiguity of whether it's the virgin or the whore. They play around that the fact that the same name is shared by two women with 2 very opposite characteristics of the Blessed Mother on the one hand, and the whore the whore of Mary Magdalene on the other, and they play with these opposites in their own rituals very much so. And you have it in other cultures too. It's big time. You see it in Hindu cultures. It's represented in the Kali worship in Shakti Shiva, and you also see this represented in various architecture, like we have in the Vatican at St. Paul's Cathedral, where in the 1530s or 1540s, you had the whole cathedral redefined around the obelisk and sort of redesigned by this Neoplatonic occultist designer named, I think his name was Bellini, who was assigned to bring this obelisk from Alexandria into the center of the Vesica. So the obelisk represents sort of the phallic symbol of the penis, right? And the Vesica is the vagina. So they often try to combine them together as far as sex rituals are concerned. You have another one in the 1830s that was done in Washington, D.C. Oh, I don't have it here, but there's one in Washington, D.C. where George Washington was, his identity as a Freemason was not he didn't take it that seriously. But what the oligarchy did after he died, in like 30 years after he died, is they started redefining his image as primarily like a Freemasonic occultist. And that was in the 1836 period that they erected the, forgive the pun, the Washington Monument. And everyone was confused because it was like, a national, what do you call it? It was a national competition over who could do an homage, a statue representing George Washington. And nobody expected this weird obelisk to win.
Interesting.
Right. And they're like, why did we do this? This was a big point of national confusion. So they're trying to redefine America around a primarily Masonic identity after the fact to try to co-opt what they couldn't destroy. So again, the Vesica Pisces concept plays in very much into the Jack the Ripper thing on a number of levels. The major players of it, you could stop the screen share for now, I guess. The major
I love that. I love the symbols and the breakdown of all that. Everybody got to go to the Matt Ehret Substack as well. It's the new year. Got to go get that Substack. Get the books. Order those books.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah, I hope so. It's
it excites me when I see all that. Continue. It's connected to Jack the Ripper.
Yeah. So on several levels, you have an intersection of several different concepts into the story of Jack the Ripper, which is number one, the fact that Charles Warren is a key figure overseeing the Ripper murders and the cover-up, as well as the killings. So who's Charles Warren? Sir Charles Warren is like one of the most powerful Grandmaster Freemasons of the British Empire, who was assigned to oversee directly by King Edward VII himself, the guy who was the first monarch since Richard the Lionheart to go to the Holy Land, which is what Richard the Lionheart was in the Holy Land during I think the Third Crusade, and had a Templar sort of symbol tattooed onto his chest. And this is the same thing that King Edward VII did when he went back and in 1862 and set up the Palestinian Expedition Fund, which he assigned Charles Warren to oversee, which was designed to excavate the Solomon caverns under the Temple Mount. Solomon. Yeah. So like all of the material that was popularized in the pop culture by Steven Spielberg or George Lucas around the figure of Indiana Jones and the Lost Ark and the Holy Grail. A lot of that material that they used to create those scripts was derived directly from the work done by Charles Warren and the Palestinian Expedition Fund. He was also calling for the British Empire to take control of Jerusalem as they had during the days of the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which is sort of a fascist kingdom managed by Knights of Malta and Knights Templar. I think the Teutonic Order as well, which were all parts of the same thing. Had different jurisdictions within this thing that oversaw the Crusades of Forever Wars. And so he called for the British Empire to take control of Palestine and to create a movement of sending the Jews back to convince the Jews to go and live in the desert on behalf of the British Empire's interests. And he was obsessed with the idea of rebuilding Solomon's temple. So obsessed. And that's actually his plans that he designed of what are the underground caverns that he published in the 1870s. He did the first Royal Arch Freemasonic ceremony in Solomon's Mines in 1867, and this actually brings in a second figure. So this is all the stuff he's doing before he's sent to become the commissioner of the Metropolitan Police of London, overseeing the Jack the Ripper murders, and then he quits like a day or two before the last murder is finished. He quits for no reason. But he's also working with another guy. He's lifelong friends in Jerusalem, starting in Jerusalem with an author from the Pall Mall Gazette, who's covering the excavation of Solomon's Temple by the name of Robert Donston Stevenson. And Robert Donston Stevenson, and also Sir Robert Anderson too, who's also the I think he's Chief Constable of Scotland Yard, overseeing the Whitechapel murders. You have William Wynne Westcott, who's the official London coroner, overseeing the murders and making sure that people don't understand the ritual black magic nature of each of the murders and how the organs were removed in a very specific way. How there was evidence of cannibalization of the womb of several of the victims.
And is that connected to the bladder? How the vesica?
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And so, you're starting to see a theme.
Scary stuff.
Of high-level occultists, right? So William Wynne Westcott is one of the three co-founders of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. Sir Robert Anderson is a leading member of the Plymouth Brethren, the esoteric section of the Plymouth Brethren that generates Aleister Crowley.
Wow.
Charles Warren is the highest level Grandmaster Freemason of the world at the time, who's assigned the weirdest job of becoming the head of the Metropolitan Police of London, right? Like, why would he be given that assignment for the position that he occupies? You're like, so there's something else that's really big. And he's working with this other guy I just mentioned named Robert Donston Stevenson, who ends up playing one of the most important roles in the murder, the Ripper murders. He otherwise goes by the name of Rosalind Donston because he names himself after his pen name. Rosalind is an homage to the Templar Rosalind Chapel. So you say Donston, Donston Stevenson, DONSTON. Yeah, there you go. Just hit him. That's him. And
the Rosalind, yeah, continue. This is so amazing.
Yeah, so he's very close to he's a writer for the Pall Mall Gazette, but he's also known as the most adept black magician of Europe, as W.T. Steed has called him that, and he's tied into the esoteric section of Madame Blavatsky's Theosophists on several points of contact, including, the esoteric section was formed in around 1887, and it tied into the Isis Urantia Lodge that the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn created, with their movement having been created around the exact same time. And all of the members, including Westcott and McGregor Mathers and another guy who I'm forgetting, of the Golden Dawn, were all members of Blavatsky's Theosophical Esoteric Society. So the Theosophical section is, the esoteric section is where they were doing like secret practical magic. The exoteric Theosophists were simply doing philosophical writings about creating, a syncretic world religion based upon the outward symbology, which of light and life and goodness, and it sounds all well and good, but those are just for the dumb, uninitiated people. The esoteric section was for the initiated, where they got to see the real story. So they're both very closely connected. Now, Donston Stevenson, he's got a witch coven. He's sort of a wizard with two witches who are both members of Blavatsky's esoteric section. Number one is Mabel Collins, who actually is a channeler, who a high priestess, who at a certain point became an enemy of Blavatsky. But I think it's one of those fake, oppositions. And she wrote several theosophical texts transmitted to her from the Ascended Masters that are still to this very day celebrated in theosophical circles. And the other woman who was another witch with Donston Stevenson was Victoria Kremers, who was had been married to a high-level Russian aristocrat, and I think she was American-born, but she lived her whole life in England, and she was a close associate with Crowley, as was Mabel Collins. And Victoria Kremers went on after this experience to become the personal secretary to Aleister Crowley at the Astrum Argentum Lodge that he set up in 1907 to be one of the venues for his Thelema religion. The other one was the Mysticum, or the Ordo Templi Orientis of the English and American branches that he was also in charge of. He tried to claim control of all of them at a certain point when Theodore Royce dies. But Victoria Kremers, Mabel Collins, I think Mabel Collins is tied to the Crowley OTO as well. Not I think she is. They run a very strange... here, I'm going to actually just play this thing. I'm going to do a screen share for a second. Okay, so I'm going to open up my other thing. Here it is. No, it's this one. So as soon as the Jack the Ripper murders are over, and Donston Stevenson is set up for the entirety time, right before the murder start and then right after they end, he's based in a hospital in Whitechapel, which is like right here. That's the Whitechapel Hospital in the red circle. So he has direct access to this entire field, and he checks himself in for no good reason. He's just got like ennui, and he's given free reign to like leave and enter on his own time at night. But he couldn't have done this alone. It required both institutional support from the police by Warren and Anderson, but also required collaboration, because these women had to be brought to those locations at a very specific time and a very specific place, which meant that he couldn't just go out and hope to find some woman standing there that he would then kill. She had to have been brought there by collaborators, right? So I think that there were many participants of the Ripper murders, but he was a key figure. And he was a student of this dude named Sir Edward Bulwer-Lytton. He was a personal disciple of Bulwer-Lytton, who was in charge of the Rosicrucian revival in England. And he ran the Rosicrucian Society of Anglia that then gave rise to a variety of sects inside of America. So, yeah, part of why okay, I don't want to get too off topic here, but the thing I'm trying to find, okay, just to show some pictures here. So these are the three key leaders of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. William Robert Woodman was the third guy I forgot. That's McGregor Mathers, who trains Crowley. That's William Wynne Westcott, the London coroner, working with Warren. And that's maybe at the top. Yeah, there it is. Okay. And so right after the murders are finished, you have the three, Mabel Collins, Victoria Kremers, and Rosalind Donston, or Robert Donston Stevenson, who set up a company called the Pompadour Cosmetics. They got this strange fixation with cosmetics, and I think it has something to do with babies and abortion, which they're also obsessed with. But anyway, and it's located right here on Baker Street, 17 Upper Baker Street. And if you look at the location, like right above the London Tube, just literally 2 buildings down is the location on Baker Street of Sherlock Holmes's. That's today the Sherlock Holmes Museum, but that's the fictional location for the character of Sherlock Holmes and Watson that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle created. Now, he created this thing. What makes this so interesting for me is that he created this location as the home office for Sherlock Holmes a full 1 year before the Jack the Ripper murders happen. And the fact that the 3 people who would have played a direct role in the Ripper murder ritual itself would set up their business directly at that same location, just like one building separating these two venues is too much of a coincidence to me, and I don't have a full answer for what that means. But what I also know is that Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, who was a surgeon as well, he was a trained surgeon, who had some weird experiences in Africa and in the Arctic, where he even he had this weird perverse thing where he even let a man die because he wanted to go hunting when he was a surgeon on a ship hunting for seals, and he left a man literally to die. He was a bit of a sick character, and he has a number of points of contact. Not only is he a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn himself, along with Crowley and along with William Wynne Westcott, but his teacher, the guy who trains him to be a surgeon in Edinburgh, is the there he is right there. That guy right there on the left is the model used to create the character of Conan Doyle, and his name is Dr. Joseph Bell. And he was hired by the London Metropolitan Police by Sir Charles Warren to track down the Whitechapel killer. So even though Sir Arthur Conan Doyle didn't himself ever write about the Ripper murders, although you think that he would have because it's so compatible with the Sherlock Holmes sort of detective story, he never wrote about it. But his teacher was directly employed to tracking down the killer that he used to create the character, that the character himself also lived in the location that one of the key killers ended up living and working in with the Pompadour Cosmetics Company. And at the end of the story, what seems to be the case is it was participating in an invocation. The murder of prostitutes is a there's a black magic ritual, which Robert Donston wrote about in the Pall Mall Gazette for W.T. Steed. While they were happening, he was writing articles for Steed while he was sitting in the hospital, while he was overseeing the murder of these people. He was writing articles about the black magic underpinnings that would have involved the need to kill and even cannibalize prostitutes specifically, as far as an invocation of demons, in a similar way that Charles Warren believed that Solomon was not the Solomon of the Old Testament, the man who's trying to be good, who's working on himself as a human being with flaws and trying to be a better person. It's not that Solomon. These guys believe in the Gnostic, Hermetic redefinition of Solomon as a demonologist. And people can read Aleister Crowley's Lower Key of Solomon text, or the Rosicrucian Testament of Solomon, that seems to have been a concoction that was written in the 14th or 15th century, which portrays Solomon. I think there's certain books within the Babylonian Talmud as well that sort of showcase this story of Solomon being featured as sort of this necromancer who's given a pentagon ring that gives him power over the Lord of the Flies, the demon hordes of Beelzebub, who then work for him as his servants to build the first Solomon temple, which we could stop the screen share right now. Actually, it's not needed anymore.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, Lesser Key of Solomon. There you go. That's a Crowley. It kind of works as a grimoire. A.E. Waite was another big Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn figure who popularized the tarot in the West, who was also working on this thing. And these guys, so let me just say this. Charles Warren believes that the location of Solomon's Temple was the key headquarters of international human sacrifice. He believes that the two caverns under the Dome of the Rock, which is today where the Holy of Holies of a Muslim shrine exists, that's the supposed location of Solomon's original temple, and the dome and the rock below the shrine, below the temple, is supposedly, I'm not convinced that this is true, but as the story goes, the location where Abraham was told to sacrifice his son, and then the angel stopped him. Which, as far as I see it now, is I see that as a political intervention into human sacrifice, where it's now stop, right? We were doing that, and now it's over. No more killing your kids. So below that rock, which still exists, there's a little room. It's called the the room of the sighs or something. It's sort of a mythical. It's a room whereby the story goes, the souls of the dead live and are condemned to sit in this room of forever sadness. Anyway, people can go in. There's photographs of this room. Even now is what Charles Warren was exploring, and below that room, there's a second room. Below that's even more secretive. I don't know who's been in there in a long time. Charles Warren did go into that second room, and then protruding out of that room are tunnels, very big tunnels that go on a long distance. Actually, I might even have it here. Let me go see if I have it.
Yeah, I actually went to Israel to the Wailing Wall and went in there, and they're like, this goes down really far because they're right next to each other. It's all connected. And it was like creepy how deep down, like you can look over the edge and see how far down it goes.
Yeah.
And then I also heard that was a fort called like an Antone fort or something.
During the Crusades?
I think even before that it wasn't even a temple, it was like a fort, like a Roman fort or something. I'll look for it and send it to you.
Okay, I'm gonna show another image here. Okay, I'm gonna do a screen. Can you go back to my screen share?
I think it's on your screen.
Oh, it is. Okay, all right. So you see this this Dome of the Rock here?
I don't see the Dome of the Rock. I see.
Okay, let me do a stop.
I think
okay, let me just reshare that. Present to we'll do stop screen because it's really important based on what was just said. Share screen. There we go. I got it. Royal Sacrifice of Prince. Okay, so this is one of the chapters in my story in volume 3. Is it's called The Royal Blood Sacrifice of Prince Albert Victor and Why the Oligarchy Hates the Jews. And that's the son who would have been king legally, the next in line after king, the guy who becomes King Edward VII, is that dude there. And he's a bit of like a flimsy, flaky character, not in control of his he just wants to have sex with things. He's not a very disciplined character. And what you have there is a picture of an etching featuring a human sacrifice of a child to Moloch, which was sort of like this weird creature that they had shrines in iron or some metal, but I think it was iron. And below its ass was this furnace, so that it was a super boiling hot piece of metal that they would put little babies into the arms of the metal thing, and the baby would slowly cook itself to death at these mass pagan ritual sacrifices. So that was actually part of why I think that his firstborn child, Edward Albert, was like, there's a lot of propaganda in Hollywood, like the movie with Johnny Depp, From Hell, that tries to propose the idea that this guy was Jack the Ripper, because as the story goes, they say, oh, he just fell in love with a London prostitute and wanted to marry her and have babies. And the royal family and the Freemasons were so pissed that you would contaminate the bloodline that they had to eliminate the prostitute and all of the witnesses, which were all of the prostitute's friends, which they had to kill. That story is not true. I once believed that it might be true, but it's no longer. I don't longer believe that that's true at all. I think that they did kill this guy, though. He died when he was 29. He had syphilis out of the wazoo, but not because he was into broken women, like female prostitutes, and they were all in their 40s and 50s who were killed by Jack the Ripper. They were living rough lives, like they were not the type of women who looked pretty. Even they didn't have teeth. The proposition that this guy would have fallen in love with one of them is inconceivable. And number two, he was gay. Yeah, he was totally gay. And there's the Maltese cross on his neck. That's him right there with his dad. So he's a junior Freemason. His dad's already Grand Master. And again, he would have been king. after his grandmother Victoria died, and after his father died, he would have been king. Turns out it was his brother. This is his lover, James Kenneth Stephen, who also was killed. He's actually a Cambridge apostle. And it's a weird story, but right, like within 20 days after Edward Albert dies, this guy also dies. He dies in the weirdest way, though. They say he committed suicide, but then you're like, how did he commit suicide? And they're like, the answer is he stopped eating. He starved himself to death because he was convinced that somebody was trying to poison him. So he didn't eat till he died. Like, that's not easy to do, to not eat until you die.
Right.
So his mom is also pretty weird too. Like that's his mom. It's not his mom. Sorry, the woman who's going to be his wife and Queen of England that he was
Looks
like
like a
betrothed
dude.
to. He dies, and then she goes off and marries his brother, and she still becomes queen. Which is again weird.
That is strange.
Yeah.
Such a, how interesting. And I love the name of this article. I want to put together a presentation on what a great title. You're great at titles and research and all that. It's I don't know how you find all these pictures.
This one I had to Photoshop, but thanks. But the thing that I really wanted to get across, because we're talking about Solomon's Temple as a zone of human sacrifice. And I got all these quotes from the Old Testament and Book of Kings and Psalms of David, like basically saying, stop killing babies to Moloch and Baal. Like it's very clear. And there's like a picture of Abraham being told, don't kill your kid. Stop it. That's Rembrandt who painted that. It's great. But here's the picture I really wanted to show. And I mentioned that there were these two caves, the cave of Sighs below the Dome of the Rock, and this other second cave with these tunnels, as you see, protruding out of that cave, which a man can walk down. Like these are very tall caves. And what Charles Warren writes about is like when addressing why were these tunnels made, he's very much convinced that these caves and tunnels was to collect the blood of human sacrifice victims. So we're talking like Aztec level mass sacrifice is how they're thinking.
Wow.
Yeah. And that all of the blood and residues would be sent down and into the surrounding soil to create, it redefines what blood and soil cults mean, right? That people are spiritually connected to a particular land.
Wow.
Yeah. And yeah, there's some pictures of that I just threw in there of Baphomet and different, devil symbols. So all that to say, oh yeah, and this is like a little section on the Protocols of Zion, which does also seem to be promoted by leading Rosicrucian and Theosophical circles, especially tied to the Lodge of Memphis and Mizraim, which Maurice Joly is also a member of the Memphis Mizraim Lodge, but so is Theodore Royce, so is Gerard Ankaus, Papus, who's promoting this thing in Russia. So this thing is cooked up by leading occultists within the Okhrana. And part of what they need to do is a lot of Jews live in Russia. And part of their formula that they were working on, this actually comes out of the Jesuits, who had been working on this since the 1540s, as far as I could tell. Well, the Templars had already been obsessed with Solomon's Temple for the same reasons. And I think they did want to rebuild it just the same way Julian the Apostate. You can stop the screen share for now.
Sure.
The same way that Julian the Apostate was sort of like the last real hardcore pagan emperor of Rome in the 360s. He was trying to rebuild Solomon's Temple for the third time because it had gotten destroyed twice. So his promise, he's trying to like weaponize the Jews. He made them all sorts of promises to rebuild the temple. It didn't work out. He dies a little, before he could accomplish a lot, but he becomes like a real icon for Aleister Crowley, for every generation of occultists after him. They all use Julian the Apostate as like their role model of what needs to be revived. And Again, he saw himself walking the footsteps of Tiberius. The Isle of Capri was big with him. He was overseeing the spread of Isis temples in Londinium as well as in Paris, Para-Isis, which is, again, Julian the Apostate was a big protector and a member of the sect of Isis. Isis was also the cult that generated probably the most killer assassins. It was they used like Dionysian orgiastic rituals and Pythian priestess as well, and sacred priestesses that would, you know, provide sex to all of the devotees. So it was a good way of just like making young idiotic men libido obsessed fools fueled with drugs and sex that would lose themselves and then be deployable as human automata to go and carry out acts of atrocity on behalf of your controllers. Similar thing was done with the Oneida Lodge or the Manson Lodge or any of the OTO lodges that were producing so many killers, including the Saturnus Lodge. So it's like a template that they do is this ISIS thing. And I think that's what ISIS unveiled was really at the heart, at its heart, was like creating a more refined model of reviving these things. The Templars, again, worked with the assassins. The assassins were also groomed through a lot of sex. They had initiatory rites. They would be drugged up. They'd wake up in paradise, have sex with a bunch of maidens for a few weeks, and then all of a sudden be given a drug and would wake up, with an assignment to go and kill a consul or something. Mm-hmm. And they do it, and it would work with the Templars, and they would take turns assassinating each other's enemies, even though one was nominally Muslim and one of them was nominally Christian. It didn't matter. So I think that a lot of these things are connected on that level. And what was I going to say? The idea of scaring the Jews, that's it. So there was a lot of Jews living in Russia and Eastern Europe, and part of the formula that the Jesuits came up with in the 1540s around this guy Francisco Ribera, who was a Jesuit grand strategist who was a leader at the Council of Trent, sort of a counter-Reformation council to just try to do a scorched earth policy against Protestants. So it was a way to nudge Catholics towards becoming like more hardcore fascist types, and to also drive more Protestants into hyper-violence in defense of their new religion. That was one of the techniques that was used as the Council of Trent. And coming out of Ribera's writings, which were revived in the 19th century, was this idea that we could create this eschatology that would bring in the Antichrist from Jerusalem and rebuild Solomon's temple. But in Ribera's writings, that was infused with the idea that the Jews have to be brought there as well. But the Jews are spread out around the world. So how are you going to get them there? And it kind of like nobody had a solution for that problem for a while. So they kind of like just stopped talking about it. And then in the 1820s, a lot of his texts were rediscovered. And the idea was revived by some figures who created the Plymouth Brethren, who created Christian Zionism, rapture theology, premillennial dispensationalism, right? That's the Council of Trent from Wikipedia. People could read that. And so part of the problem was the Jews living in Europe and Russia were they didn't want to leave. They're like, centuries were spent there. So why would they leave? And so you had to create a situation of political terror where Jewish people especially wouldn't feel comfortable living in your homelands, wherever that might be. And so
that's what they're doing now. I swear. Like if I'm Jewish, I'm Jewish and my family's Jewish, and like that's the thing is like I'm like, where am I supposed to run to now? Like, like they're doing that right now. So yeah, but I'm such a small minority of the population that none of my opinions will matter on like so I love this information that you're saying, because it makes me understand what's happening right now. Because if you're Jewish, you're trying to figure out where to go if you're with the rise of anti-Semitism and whatnot.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's coming in heavier and heavier, and it that always tends to happen whenever the economy goes to shit, because the oligarchy is trying to kill us all. Whenever like it goes, it's like there's always this easy scarecrow of just hate the Jews. It's their fault. And And the Templars, before they even made it to the Holy Land for the First Crusade, before they got to the Holy Land, they wiped out several hundred Jewish families. Like they just wiped them out en route to get to the Holy Land to fight the Muslims along the way, because it's Jesus killers. And so the Theosophists hate the Jews too. That's the irony, is that when you read the writings of Charles Warren or Aleister Crowley, like they like Kabbalists. They like because the Kabbalists that they like, and there might be some good traditions of Kabbalism, I don't know. I've been told that there's some healthier interpretations of it, maybe, but the ones I've been looking at are not that. They like the types that are tied to, basically the Babylonian high priesthood, which was, it seems, where a lot of the black magic of Kabbalah was defined and infused into Jewish doctrines around a high priesthood of Babylonian traders who called themselves maybe rabbis or Jewish leaders, but they really weren't. They were just taking Babylonian myths and Babylonian esoteric practices for the high priesthood and then redefining it for a Jewish sort of audience to be a self-controlling thing based upon a cryptic, like let's take every, 77th letter of the Torah and treat the Torah as one giant, like word or what sound. And then we'll like have secret meetings that only an elite can know. Again, it's again, cipher, cryptography stuff. And that there's certain rituals like going into a self-induced hypnosis or trance using like incense, light, maybe a bit of hallucinogenic opium or something. And you can go and get a mystical experience that way and come out of it like a new man or new woman, whatever. So that they like. That's what the Nazis liked as well. When you had Eichmann studying Hebrew, and Eichmann was obsessed with bringing a bunch of Jews as well into the Holy Land. It's not like he liked the Jews.
I wonder
he hated them.
Yeah, why do they want them all there? Is it, you think that we get off the deep end maybe, but from what you're showing, it seems like the get people there to charge the soil with that ritual thing that you were showing me. I don't know but from everything that you've been talking about, it's really make me understand the manipulation at play. Everybody's got to watch all of our videos that we've done together, because I've asked these like questions and understanding what's going on through the October 7th and all the war stuff going on, to the like all the connections with the United Nations and then the Templars. It seems that this is what's going on, is some Knights Templar assassin order, like these mystery cults. And this topic is not really popular. What's popular, it's the Jews, but like that's what's popular, it seems like. But I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm just looking for a picture. Yeah, I mean, one of the so these guys who are putting all of this effort into creating this new cultural movement to convince the Jews to just go and live in the desert, they don't like the Jews. The authors of the Balfour Accords that justify the creation of the state of Israel are people like Lloyd George, who's a pro-Nazi fascist who hates the Jews. Leo Amory, also an anti-Semite, hates the Jews. His kid Julian Amory ends up like working to oversee Operation Gladio and a bunch of unreconstructed Nazis who go to work for the CIA in the Cold War. Milner is another co-author of the Balfour Accords, and Lord Balfour. Lord Balfour himself is he despises the Jews. Robert Anderson, who's overseeing Scotland Yard, he hates the Jews, and he's actually putting out the first propaganda in the 1888, 1889 to try to make it seem as though the Jack the Ripper killer was a Jewish butcher or something, which is now being revived, by the way. Even today, they've done like DNA tests on some piece of cloth or whatever, and they're like, oh, it's actually true. It was a Jewish killer who was the serial killer of Jack. That's actually something that's in CNN today, or this week.
Well, that's the thing, is that the mainstream media is like very anti-Israel. The United Nations anti-Israel as well. And then you got all these big figures Candace Owens, Dan Brazilian, very famous, really pushing like a lot of it's the Jews stuff as well. And then all the video footage that makes the Jews just look like really bad. And then that's just like more amped and promoted
Well,
as well. And then it's just was strange.
well, here, do a screen share for me again. I got my screen up. Okay, so that's a picture of something that so originally what's his name? Theodore Herzl, who is an atheist anyway. Like he wasn't even, his identity wasn't even a religious Jew. He's an atheist, kind of a misanthrope. He was a follower of Nietzsche. He was selected to be sort of the front man to promote this new movement. And he had this view of consolidating this promise of God to Moses or whatever, and that, you know, that Israel was going to have a certain size to it at some point. Now, that wasn't going to be easy at the time that he was speaking in the 1890s. And that's where the greater Israel concept came out of, that it's the rightful place for the Jews to claim this entirety of the zone. That's like a third of Saudi Arabia and half of Iraq and most of Syria and all of Jordan and Lebanon and a bunch of Israel, all the way to the Nile, and up to the Euphrates. And that geography, a lot of Jews didn't care. Like, they didn't want that. They just wanted a place to be safe. That was their primary motive. I would say like 97% of the Jews, most of whom would have preferred to have gone to Miami, you know, then after
A real Holy Land, yes.
but there was a lot of effort to try to like create an infrastructure, create a space for them to just go to that specific location that was going to be in a geopolitically expedient spot where all of the different civilizations of the world intersect right there in the Middle East. And that was always known. Whoever could control that area, as Mackinder made the point, between the Red Sea and the Mediterranean would be, and the Persian Sea, would be able to control the heartland, with the entire world island, as they say, right? Where Africa meets Europe and Asia and Russia, everything intersects there. So if you can keep that zone controlled and destabilized, you can control strategically everything. So that was part of the idea, I think. Then you had a bunch of, so if I'm going to scroll up here, one of the things that the Plymouth Brethren occultists were obsessed with in terms of creating a hub in which revelation could be manifest, like this dude.
That's what it seems like. It's all this whole thing going on is part of it. Getting everyone to even hate the Jews in Israel is part of that. It seems like.
Yeah, it's all part of it. It's you got to bring out the worst elements and promote the worst element of every culture and make that appear to be what the culture itself is, so that people will hate Americans. They would rather America be destroyed, because America, all they can associate with the United States is a country of slavery, white supremacism, hypocrisy, empire, exploitation. And if that's all America is, then I could understand why young people would want that thing to be destroyed. So they define everything around the most worst expression of itself, so that you miss the good that made these things viable in the first place, and all of the beautiful good ideas and good, like everything good that came out of Christianity or Judaism. They want to erase that and just have the worst behavior become the thing. So, but part of what they want around this greater Israel concept is the revival of Babylon. So the geography of the first Babylonian empire of Nebuchadnezzar occupies a terrain which is not that dissimilar from the greater Israel map.
Yeah, it looks just like it.
It's pretty close, right? And in the writings by these Plymouth Brethren freaks, like this guy George Pember, who's done work on the that guy there, who did a lot of work on the he was a very close collaborator with Nelson Darby. He's very clear that we have to recreate Babylon as high fidelity as possible in order for the Antichrist to emerge, and for a purgative violence, like sort of a cleansing of humanity to occur. Now, ultimately, what they all want to do is bring in the kingdom of Jerusalem. So out of the ashes of the thing that can be induced to kill all of the Arabs and the Jews, because they despise Arabs and Jews. They think that they're subhuman. They're from one of the earlier like Lemurian root races of the theosophical cosmology of this neo-Darwinian spiritual eugenics.
Right.
Blavatsky promoted this idea that there's 7 root races, and we're at the end point of the 5th root race, and the inferior species of dark-skinned people, and they come from like an earlier Lemurian root race that they're still like carryovers that should have been extinguished by now by just the forces of evolution. And the Aryan and Teutonic breeds come out of the higher Atlantean root race, which are the seed for the new species, the new transhumanist species that will emerge. That's how they think about it. And so in their world, it's very natural that the inferior Lemurian connected root races be extinguished because they're stubborn. And so they want to create a situation of cataclysmic annihilation within the Middle East that will kill, again, most of the Arabs and most of the Jews will just be induced to slaughter themselves. And then out of the chaos, they believe that they can sort of control the reimposition of some new order that would look a lot like the old Templar kingdom of Jerusalem, which would be the seat of some sort of a new Aeon of Horus or some shit, whereby, they can get back to the good old fashioned mass human sacrifices. Everyone could just be in a Dionysian orgy of drugs who are allowed to survive, and those who are not have to be slaves living in squalor, and we'll have alien gods, to sacrifice to and to pray to in this new revelation for the new Aeon of Seth or Horus or Aquarius, whatever you want to call it. So that's my concern right now, of one of those, like, the negative nudging that we're being pushed towards is that type of reset. And there's obviously things, when you look at this history, you could see that there's all these points of weakness that the oligarchy is afraid of, that humans have brought, have been able to invoke through tapping into our own divine nature, that allows us to be liberated from the traps and the games that the oligarchy wants us to step into, including especially like the role of leading Platonic Jewish and Christian collaborators like Saint Peter and Rabbi Philo of Alexandria, just a few decades after Jesus was killed, who are working together to expose Simon the Magician, who gives rise to all of the Gnostic cults that were trying to subvert Christianity from within and conduct child sacrifice under the name of Christianity. He was being exposed. He was being supported by Nero, by Caligula, but he was exposed by the work of Rabbi Philo and Saint Peter. You had like leading Jewish and Christian and Muslim collaborators working together in the 8th, 9th centuries with Charlemagne, Harun al-Rashid, King Bulan, the Turkic king who brought in Judaism into Khazaria. They were working to create this Renaissance dynamic of collaboration with the Chinese Tang dynasty in opposition to this oligarchical mystery cult priesthood of forever wars and superstition. Like, they were all working together in opposition. And that's the type of thing that the oligarchy hates and fears. And so my philosophy is, whatever the oligarchy is afraid of is what we should try to study and figure out how to tap into that stuff more. Because that's what they don't want to have happen again today.
100%. Wow. Yeah. That's going to give me a deep dive to go down. I would like to put together a presentation on all that. And though these are topics that we don't hear about. Other topics get pushed by the mainstream, the UFOs, the drones, whatever it is, by the algorithms. But how many people know any of the stuff that you have just brought to the table and done this deep research? This has been incredible, Matt. I'm so grateful for you to come on here. And I got all of your links down below. Make sure to grab all 3 of these books. I could just keep on talking forever and listening to you. And here's your Substack. Go subscribe to the Substack. Go to the website. But go grab these books. Absolutely incredible. Yeah, I don't want to take up too much of your time.
No, this was good, dude, man. Like I obviously I spent every waking hour of the last several years of my life thinking about nothing but this. So chances to talk about this is like the purpose of my life. So this is good, man. I don't yeah, this is nice. I could have kept talking, and if we want to do a follow up chat at some point down the line on volume 2 on the occult Tesla and Elon and Thiel operation, which brings in a bit of Darwin and Newton, as well as synthetic fake cardboard cutouts that offered nothing to human progress or science, but were traps, all of them. We could do that too at some point.
Oh, I would love that. Yeah, I would love that. I'm going to edit this video as well. Maybe I won't edit it too much because that's like a full like 2.5 hours, but I definitely want to edit um a lot of the imagery and go to some of the pictures because I like it. I learn a lot when I edit videos because like you'll talk and then I'll bring up the images and look at it, and then it makes me understand. Where would you like people to go to, and what can we look out for in 2025?
Well, you sold it really well, man. I mean, if people just do what you said to do, then I'll be happy. And I guess in 2025, yeah, we got a lot on our plate, but definitely we want to get a few more episodes of The Hidden Hand Behind UFOs. We've released 3 episodes of that documentary so far. We're going to be taking that story further into the Scientologists, the Falun Gong operations, which is just another Asian version of Scientology tied to demonology and UFOs and stuff, that's designed to destroy China, and just or weaponize a lot of dumb Westerners to support going to war with evil bad China that's somehow working with the bad aliens, but we're with the good aliens. There's a whole weird thing there. Anyway, that story's coming out in one of the future episodes, and Cynthia's got a lot. She's got further up volumes. She just produced a second volume of her series on towards the making of a world religion on Jesuits and anthropologists and the creation of a new ghost dance religion. So that's a wild story that she's got going into how a lot of the Smithsonian and Jesuit operations to create sacred stories for natives has been redefined or used again, but now to weaponize and drive a bunch of Christians towards their own self-annihilation in the same way that the Jesuits manipulated the natives to do the ghost dance religion and basically create a mass suicide by running into bullets of American soldiers in the 1890s. So that's being done again, but now with something that Brett and Eric Weinstein are a part of, to Phoenix the Republic. So yeah, she's done a lot of work on making a video there, making a book. She's going to do more. And yeah, man, we're just going to keep it busy, and hopefully some of these ideas can resonate with the people who need to understand this, and hopefully some people who can influence some policies in a wiser way than what we're seeing so far. So that's yet to be seen.
Wow, that's awesome. And is that being worked on for 2025, or is that out now on
That's
what you're talking about?
Recently released with her video. So she did a 45-minute video and the book to sort of come out together, that they're both released as well.
Okay.
And maybe you guys could have a chat about that at some point soon.
Yeah, because I like how she uncovered how the Jesuit 32 spoke sun wheel and Smithsonian is 16 and it's cut in half on her Substack. She showed that was pretty mind-blowing.
yeah, blew my mind too. I know. No, it's yeah, these creeps are they're everywhere, eh? Like, and it's right in our face. That's what's so frustrating about it, is that they just rub it in the face. And they're
well,
again, the method that we use, like, we're really trying to use a method where we're starting with, what are they afraid of? Like, what is natural law? Like, what is it that happy integrated humans do when we're operating on that higher natural level, which you can study throughout history? And what do we produce as far as scientific discoveries, as far as musical and artistic and architectural innovations? What do we do when we're being good politically? What does that look like? And then when you have enough of a mapping of a lot of the good stuff,
then you could sort of see more clearly the points of dark contrast, but not in a totally disempowering way. It demoralizes me for sure to read about disgusting evil a lot, which I probably do too much, and I need to balance it. Just speaking to myself here for the new year, I got to listen to more Beethoven, and I gotta feed the higher stuff a little bit more than I am. But all that to say, what I find is as a warning, I'm just saying this to some of the readers out, or readers and listeners out there, is that you want to give your soul, we're at war. You can't give your soul the food that the oligarchy has cooked up for it, which is like the majority of the things, unfortunately, that are prevalent in our culture that are there for our entertainment are mostly there to bring out the weakest part of ourselves, that we don't need to have more of that when we're going to battle. We got to look for the strongest parts of ourselves that don't exist yet, which means like doing the work of reading Plato's dialogues as far as spiritual weightlifting, reading the Edgar Allan Poe's short stories as that weightlifting, you know, and listening to Mozart and Brahms as far as like just thinking about things that at first are difficult because we're not used to that stuff, but it becomes much more rewarding and enriching in the long run to do that. And you find that your creative powers work better, your sense of self-happiness works better, your ability to overcome problems is just working better. And so that's the only way to look, because a lot of people, by only looking at the dark stuff, they kind of drown out. Like it becomes too much and they burn out. And I've seen it myself. I've seen it in so many other people, and we're going into 2025. So it's going to get a lot more challenging, and there could be a lot more opportunities to encounter a lot of dark shit in our lives. So we have to be as strong as possible when we get ready to encounter that stuff, right? So that's just a little message, a little New Year's message to the audience.
I love that. That's amazing. Yeah. And also like all the research of that you do, even if it is dark, I feel like it's more positive than watching the TikTok algorithm, Twitter post, which are just these little short memes that seem to be given the whole entire conspiracy world brain rot, where they're just like not functional. Your content, even as if it gets dark or whatever, it's learning, it's long form, it's good. And I'm just so grateful for you, Matt. Thank you so much. This has been a great episode. Everybody, smash that like button. It's DOENUT. Much love, and God bless you.